Dear participant, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. So, on behalf of National Young Academy of Bangladesh, I welcome you all in today's webinar. The title of today's webinar is Why Not to Publish Your Research. This is a very interesting topic and this is really useful for our young researchers. In today's webinar, there are three speakers. They will deliver their speech on this topic, and there are three knowledgeable panelists. So after the presentation, the panelists will express their opinion, suggestion, and comments, which will be very useful for us. So among the members of the panelists, there is Professor Muhammad Ataul Karim. Now I am presenting a brief introduction about Professor Ataul Karim. He is Provost, Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Chief Operating Officer of the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Starting from September 2021, Dr. Karim will resume his duties as a faculty member. Previously, he served as the first Vice Chancellor of Research of the Old Dominion University in Virginia, then Dean of Engineering at the City College of New York, 2000 to 2004, Head of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Tennessee, and Chair of Electrical and Computer Engineering, 1994 to 1998, and Founding Director of Electro-Optics, 1990 to 1998 at the University of Dayton in Ohio. He is an elected fellow of the Institution of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Optical Society of America, the Society of Photo Instrumentation Engineers, the Institute of Physics, the Institution of Engineering Technology, and the Bangladesh Academy of Sciences. Dr. Karim is author or editor of 19 text and reference books, over 365 research papers, 8 book chapters, 3 US patents, and of numerous technical reports. Dr. Karim served as guest editor of 36 journal special issues and as research mentor for over 55 MS and PhD students. He is editor of Optics and Laser Technology, an associate editor of the IEEE Transactions of Education, and a member of the editorial board of Microwave and Optical Technology Letters. Dr. Karim's area of research encompasses optical computing, information processing, pattern of target recognition, night vision, displays, electro-optical systems, and sensors. The list of his research sponsors include Office of Naval Research, National Science Foundation, US Air Force, Naval Architecture Laboratory, US Army, NASA, US Department of Education, Ohio Aerospace Institute, US Department of Defense, and Avionics Laboratory of Reed-Peterson Air Force Base. Muhammad Karim received his BS Honours degree in Physics from the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh in 1976, and MS in Physics, MS in Electrical Engineering, and PhD in Electrical Engineering degree from the University of Alabama, respectively in 1978, 1979, and 1981. And I am very pleased to say that he is one of the 11 advisors of National Young Academy of Bangladesh. So I welcome Professor Muhammad Ataul Karim sir in today's program. Sir, thank you very much for your valuable time. Our second panelist is Professor Dr. Muhammad Ashraful Alam. Professor Alam holds the Jai and Gupta Professorship at Purdue University, USA, where his research focuses on the physics and technology of semiconductor devices. From 1995 to 2003, he worked in the Silicon ULSI group at Bell Laboratories, Murray Hill, New Jersey. Since returning to Purdue in 2004, his group has explored the reliability physics of nanotransistors, limits of nanobiosensors, atom-to-firm modeling of solar cells, and physics and optical technology of Landau transistors. He is a fellow of IEEE, APS, AAS. His awards include 2006 IEEE Kyo Tomiyasu Medal for contributions to device technology for communication systems, 2015 SRC Technical Excellence Award for fundamental contributions to reliability physics, and 2018 IEEE EDS Education Award. Professor Alam enjoys teaching. More than 3,15,000 students worldwide, I am mentioning the number, 3,50,000 students worldwide have learned some aspects of semiconductor devices from his web-enabled courses. That is amazing. we really appreciate your time, sir, and for joining us in today's webinar. And our another panelist is Professor Dr. Mohammad Tariq Rahman. He was earlier, he also gave us a presentation in a webinar. And Professor Tariq completed BSc in 1993 and MSc in 1995 in microbiology from the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, MSc in 1998, and PhD in 2001 in biochemistry from Catholic University Leuven, Belgium. He worked at University of Fukui, Japan, as Center of Excellence researcher in the field of neuroscience, 2004 to 2005. He started academic career in biotechnology discipline, Khulna University, 1996 to 2003, and later served as the founding chairman of the Department of Pharmacy at East West University, Dhaka, 2004. He also worked as faculty member at International Islamic University of Malaysia, 2005 to 2015. Since July 2015, Professor Tariq is attached with the Faculty of Dentistry, University of Malaya. Among his multidisciplinary research interests, notable contributions are made in the field of metallobiochemistry in health and diseases, medicinal and pharmacological applications of natural products, neocortex development, halal food science, detection of pathogenic bacteria and viruses, and more recently on cytometrics. Professor Tariq is the founding president of the Malaysian Society for Oral Microbiological Journal of the Faculty of Dentistry, University of Malaya. So we are seeing an amazing, actually, a track record of Professor Tariq Rahman in biological science and also in dentistry. So our heartiest welcome, Professor Tariq Rahman, and thank you very much for joining with us in today's webinar. So these are the three knowledgeable panel member of the panelists of today's webinar. And now I am introducing our speakers. The first one is Professor Abdullah Shams bin Tariq. Professor Shams bin Tariq is actually a founding member of National Young Academy of Bangladesh, and he is one of the 4 members. Consists of Professor Manjarul Karim, Dr. Nova Ahmed, and Dr. Moniruddin Badal, and Abdullah bin Shams Tariq. These 4 members actually started the initiative of the forming of National Young Academy of Bangladesh a couple of years ago. So he is currently a professor of physics at the University of Rajshahi, and Professor Tariq received his PhD from the University of Southampton as a Commonwealth Scholar. He is an Associate Fellow of Bangladesh Academy of Sciences, one of the founders and current member of National Young Academy of Bangladesh, what I have mentioned earlier, in the alumnus of Global Young Academy, where he also led the working group of global access to research software and served 2 terms on the GIA Executive Committee. He has also been a junior associate of the Abdus Salam ICTP, Trieste, Italy, and a member of the first International Advisory Board for Author 8. He has won the Rajak Shamsun Physics Research Award in 2003, Best Research by Bangladeshi Physicists in a Year, and the Tuas Young National Scientist Award Bangladesh in 2010, Physical Sciences, Junior category. He is also serving as Deputy Director, Center of Excellence in Teaching and Learning at his university. Apart from research in particle and nuclear physics, he has devotedly worked for research capability building in Bangladesh by pioneering the Library Consortium of Bangladesh for access to e-resources, as well as setting up one of the first high-performance computing clusters in Bangladesh, whose name is Arun. Currently, Dr. Tariq is co-chairing an inter-academy partnership, which is known as IAP, working group on combating predatory academic journals and conferences. He is also an open access enthusiast with concerns in particular on how the author-pays model of OIA implementation has triggered the rise in predatory publishing. He is keen follower of developments such as Plan S, Project Guild, and SEO AP3. So I welcome you, Professor Abdullah Shams bin Tariq, in today's webinar, and thank you very much for your valuable time. Our next speaker is Dr. Mainul Hussain. He is also a new member of National Young Academy of Bangladesh.
Professor Basit, I will speak at the end.
So there is that's no problem. That's no problem, Shams. I know that. who will speak first, and I know that. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we will speak at the end. And Dr. Mainul Hussain, he has received BSc degree in Applied Physics, Electronics and Communication Engineering from the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh in 2009, and MS and PhD degrees in Electrical Engineering from the University of Central Florida, Orlando, USA in 2012. From 2012 to 2017, he served as a senior engineer and then as principal engineer at the Advanced Model Engineering Group of Global Foundries, US, in Malta, New York, USA. Since 2017, he has been working as a faculty member in the Department of Electrical and Electrical Engineering at the University of Dhaka, where he is currently working as an assistant professor. And our another presenter is Dr. Sajid Mohamed Chaudhry, who is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Tripoli, Buet. Dr. Chaudhry completed his PhD from the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering in Purdue University. Dr. Chaudhry had the privilege of acquiring skills of both experimental and numerical approaches to solve problems related to photonics. His goal is to establish an independent research career in Bangladesh with multidisciplinary collaborations to attack problems related to food safety, energy, healthcare, and communication. Dr. Chaudhry actively engages and volunteers in professional societies like IEEE, and he is also a new member of National Young Academy of Bangladesh. So these are the three speakers. So first of all, I will request Dr. Mainul Hussain to deliver his speech. Dr. Mainul, your time is around 15 minutes. And I think in the meantime, our audience is, how many of them are present here? Around 80 participants are there. So I think please take 15 minutes time. Please start your presentation. You can share your slide, Dr. Mainul. Our next speaker will be Dr. Sajid Mohamed Chaudhry.
Okay, thank you, Professor Basit sir. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to present. Actually, I've been told there are some foreign participants attending the webinar, so I'll be delivering my talk in English, but if you have any questions, you can later ask me in Bangla. That's also fine. Okay, so thank you, National Young Academy of Bangladesh, for this opportunity. So we'll be talking about this topic today, like where not to publish your research. So we have three speakers today, as Professor Basit mentioned, and I'll be the first speaker and we'll talk about predatory journals and conferences. Okay, so a little bit brief introduction about the National Young Academy of Bangladesh. So since its inception in 2019, NYAB has been working actively to promote science education and awareness in Bangladesh, and it provides a platform for young researchers to collaborate both nationally and internationally. So let's come to the topic today. So we are discussing about predatory journals. So we are familiar with the term predatory, something that hunts, okay, that's a predator. And we have this term quite common these days in academia, because we have some predatory journals which always hunt for new and young researchers. So according to Nature, there's no specific definition for predatory, but there are some features or characteristics by which we can identify them. For example, the predatory journals, they provide misleading information. They don't have standard editorial practices, and I'm going to talk more about that later. And they have some aggressive solicitation processes, like they'll send you lots of emails and then ask you to submit papers and all. Okay, so with the digital era, we have a lot of online journals, and this has seen a significant rise in predatory journals as well. So we call this really a big minefield out there. And so as a young researcher, we have to be very careful where we are stepping, right? So you don't want to get caught with predatory journals. Okay. So recent articles in journals like Nature and Science have put a lot of focus on this predatory publishing. As you can see over here, I put some recent examples from Nature and Science, and which means that there is a significant rise in predatory journals these days. Okay, so just to come back to the point about predatory journals, basically they publish your paper very quickly. You don't need to wait. There's no rigorous review process, and your acceptance is guaranteed. And also the editorial board that they have is always questionable. Side by side, I've shown here what the good journals do. Basically, they have a strong peer review process. So when you submit your paper, it goes through several experts in the field who look into the paper, and they give you some corrections and they make some recommendations. So the whole process takes time. So it's not like the predatory journals that you submit and you get accepted right away. Okay. Now, let's look into some sting operations. These are some interesting stories. One of the science journalists from Science magazine, John Bohannon, he carried out investigation where he submitted a fake journal to around 304 predatory publishers. And interestingly, 50% of that got accepted. So this was a really fake science paper that had no scientific value, but still you see it got accepted. So it shows how bad the peer review process is for predatory journals. This is also another interesting, I was just talking about that they have a fake editorial board. So a few researchers from Poland, they actually made up a CV for a fake editor, and she applied for an editorial post in some predatory journals, whereas the person doesn't really exist. So they basically made a fake resume and submitted to the journals, and it got accepted. So it shows that without any background check, they accept anybody as editors. Okay. Now, how do we identify predatory journals? Now, there's no universal list. You just cannot go to one repository and then find all the predatory journals there. But the closest one we have is called the Beals list. And he's a librarian at the University of Colorado, Denver. So he made a list that was active till 2017. The list is no longer continued officially because they had some lawsuits and all. But still, it's a pretty good resource where you can find a list of predatory journals. Another resource is the Cables list, but you need to pay for that in order to access that list. Other than that, you have the university library websites. You can go to Yale, Harvard, or any other good schools library website, and then you can check out for the predatory journals. But it's really hard to keep track of all these lists. But I'll show you some quick ways by which you can identify them. Typically, these journals have a name that starts with international, global, or worldwide. So here's a quick look about the red flags for the predatory journals. Like I said, they promise very quick publication. The articles have really no scientific or academic value, and they charge you a high article processing charges. Sometimes these are really hidden charges, and if you don't look out for it, then you may be in trouble. And later, if you want to withdraw your paper, they'll still charge you. But be careful, because all journals that have APCs are not predatories. There are also good journals which have article processing charges. So you need to be a little bit cautious over here. The publisher information is not there. The website is really, I call it crappy, because there's no information there. It says international, global, and they keep sending you emails. I'll show you some examples, and where they send you, I call it flattering emails. They call you esteemed researchers and all these things. And as I said, they make false claims on impact factors and editorial board. So how do we know which are good journals? So typically we go look for index journals. There are popular indexed databases like Scopus and Clarivet, and also PubMed, as well as the directory of open access journals. So if you go to these websites and you don't find the desired journal that you're looking for, then most likely that is a predatory journal. Okay. And there's a good website called Think, Check, Submit. So if you go there, you will get more details on this, on how to find this out. So since we're talking about indexed journals, here are some examples mostly from science and engineering disciplines. These are some learned societies which have very good journals. These are some commercial publishers. They are also world famous. Okay. Now let's look at the context from Bangladesh perspective. So most of you are aware of the Bangladesh Journal Online, or more commonly known as Banglajol. It has a list of the journals that are published from Bangladesh mostly. So out of this list, according to Scientific Bangladesh, this is an online portal, there are 17 journals which are Scopus indexed. And you can see the quartile rankings. Dr. Sajid will talk more about these quartile rankings or metrics later on. So these are the 17 index journals from Bangladesh. Okay, in terms of predatory journals, Bangladesh is unfortunately not far behind. This is an article from 2018, which lists the top 20 countries publishing predatory journals by number. Okay, and Bangladesh is there. It's like 550 publications in 2018, and it ranks number 13 there. And not only in terms of publishing fake journals or fake articles, Bangladesh also has predatory publishers. This is an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it talks about a predatory publisher that is based in Bangladesh. Okay, so you can check it out later. So why do we do this? As you know, the academic pressure is there, and it's more common in the Western world that you need to publish or perish, right? So that kind of puts the pressure on the academicians to publish, and sometimes you are in a hurry to publish your articles. So you look for the easy solution, and that is predatory. Okay, and then comes the important part that especially in Bangladesh's context, we give priority on quantity over quality. Okay, so if you have more articles, you are more famous, right? That's what we think, but we don't look at the quality, so that's a bad thing. And quantity actually dictates our promotion in academia, especially in Bangladesh, and also it dictates our degrees. Okay, so we don't look for quality. So that's another reason actually. Okay, so here's some examples. I was talking about some examples. This is from my own inbox email that I always get from predatory journals. You can see I have shown you the email address. It's from a Gmail, so it's not official. And if you look at maybe the text are a little, small for reading, but you can see that they are claiming publication within 7 to 10 days. Okay, and here even there's one article here that says the acceptance is guaranteed in 24 hours. And here they show the price, like 50 US dollar for foreign authors and 2,000 rupees for local authors. So be careful about this type of emails. If you get this, don't fall into this trap. So look out for these signs, okay? Now, I was talking about impact factors. Sometimes we are misled by the fact that, okay, some journals have impact factors and we think, okay, this is a good journal, but be careful, there are also fake impact factors, okay? Like for example, this is a journal in the Bill's list, which Journal of Current Research in Science, and it claims there are, a lot of impact factors like index, Copernicus, universal impact factor. So these are all like fake. So be careful about this. Okay. Now I'm not going to go into the details for this slide. Rather, I'm going to show you some examples. This is taken from the Stony Brook website, and it actually discusses about how to identify predatory journals from their websites. So let's look into some examples rather than dissecting this slide, okay? So here are some journals. I'm sorry, I might have picked most journals from the engineering field because that's what I get in my email mostly. And you can see these journals do exist in the Bill's list. So first one example I'm showing is the International Journal of Scientific and Engineering Research. Okay, so if you go to their website, you'll see there's a fancy picture over here, some student looking at the sky. So this is not professional. Okay, you'll see that they have a claim to publish thesis. I have not heard of any journals which like makes a claim like that. And then you have an impact factor 4.9. Obviously, this is not true. Okay, a journal with a 4.9 impact factor doesn't have such an unprofessional website. Okay, so here's another example. Okay, so again, you see the common thing. Most of these start with the word international, and we have a tendency to believe that anything international is really outstanding, but in this case, it's not. This is International Journal of Advanced Research in Electrical, Electronics, and Instrumentation Engineering. You see, they have given a WhatsApp number. Okay, this is a red flag, a big red flag. Okay, if you go to the editorial board, you will see that, okay, they mention an editor, but there's no contact details or affiliation with it. And obviously, a 7 impact factor journal won't look like this. Here's another interesting example. This is a global journal. It claims that it's based in US. If you go to their website, this is also from the bills list, as you can see. You'll see that, okay, they have a YouTube commercial there. Okay, so this is very, very funny, I would say. Okay, they are advertising their journals with a YouTube commercial. Okay, now recently I have seen a lot of review papers. People are doing a lot of review papers from Bangladesh, and to meet that demand, there's also journals which have come up, right? Predatory journals which publish review. So this is a journal, this is called World Journal of Research and Review. You can see, again, it's claiming fake impact factors, and they have interesting article processing charges. You'll see that they charge $90 US without a DOI and $105 US with DOI. So that's a very questionable thing. Okay. Anyway, so like predatory journals, we have predatory conferences as well. This is another sting of operation by the MIT graduate students, which is back from 2005 or so. From the artificial intelligence lab, they actually created a software which can generate fake predatory papers, right? And they submitted it to a conference and it got accepted, right? So without any review, obviously. And it has the like nonsense graphs and which looked realistic, but actually doesn't carry any useful information. So this is a example of a website from a predatory conference. And look how they advertise it. They actually gave popular tourist destinations as their locations. So you'll be tempted to go there and present your paper. But if you really do so, you need to pay a high amount of registration fees, book expensive hotels. So you'll be just wasting your money. Okay, because if you go there, you might find out that they don't really exist. Okay, so it's like more like a tourist website advertising fancy locations. Okay. Now, checklist, I've already gone through this. I'm not going to go into the details. It's basically the same as the predatory journals. For the conferences, they also promise quick publication and then nice tourist destinations and all. And if you look very closely, you'll see that it's not a valid conference as well. Okay. Okay, so I'll be ending in the next 1 or 2 minutes. So what are the perils of predatory publishing? Why should we not do this? First of all, if you're a scientist, you have some responsibility as a researcher, as a scientist. You should not mislead your peers, right? So you should not publish in predatory journals. Well, it might give you immediate promotions and all, but it leaves a permanent stain on your academic reputation, okay? It's a waste of money and effort. Whatever you do, you might say, okay, I got promoted, but I got some award. But in the long run, it's a waste of your effort. Especially those working in medical science, you have to be very careful what you publish and how you display your research, because it might have a direct impact on the human lives. Okay, so And also a lot of universities and institutions are becoming aware of this issue. So if you think that, okay, I'm getting away today with this, I mean, don't think like that, because sooner or later you'll get caught, okay? And this can be really disastrous for your academic and research career, okay? So I'm gonna end with this slide, okay? This is about the fight against the predatory journals and conferences. What should we really do? First of all, we should talk more about this, okay? That's why we have arranged this webinar from NYAB today. Then we should expose the predatory journals. This is an article from one of our panelists, this very nice one. And also, as you can see, the world is not sitting idle. The Federal Trade Commission in the US, they filed a lawsuit against Omics International. This is a predatory publisher based in India, and it's a $50 million lawsuit. So, I mean, predatory publishing, all academicians should come together to fight against it. And this is an article from researchers at the Ottawa Hospital. It's published in Nature Human Behavior, and they talk about creating awareness, especially for young researchers, so that they don't submit it here. And also for institutionally, the awareness should come. And also they should provide incentives to young researchers to publish in legitimate aid journals. The funding agencies who are providing money for research, they should also do some auditing. The stakeholders, the scientific community, the colleagues, your peers who are reading your papers should actually come forward and raise their voice against this issue, okay? So with that in mind, I hope I didn't bore you with my presentation. So thank you, everyone. Okay. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Manuel, for your nice presentation. It was really informative, and we'll accept questions later on. Right now, I'll request Dr. Sajid Mohamed Chaudhry to deliver your speech. And Dr. Sajid, may I request you to finish your talk by 15 minutes? We already lag behind 5 to 7 minutes. So Dr. Sajid, I welcome you for your presentation, and your allocated time is 15 minutes. Thanks, Sajid. Microphone is up to you.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me the opportunity. And I'm going to be talking about journal matrices. As Professor Mainul before me, he spoke a lot about predatory journals. I want to give some idea about where, how to objectively measure a particular journal. So there are two ways Professor Manuel mentioned briefly. Firstly, is the journal indexed in any reputed database? And secondly, the overall importance of the journal in a particular field or overall in science. So if we look at some reputed databases, there are a number of reputed databases that Professor Manuel mentioned already. There are two particular databases that are very prestigious. Firstly, the Web of Science database that was originally the first database of collectively that maintained a list of journals. And secondly, the Scopus database. I'm going to briefly talk about these. So the Web of Science database was originally produced by the Institute for Scientific Information, or ISI. Dr. Eugene Garfield was the founder of this institute, and he actually came up with the idea of impact factor. And this changed ownership quite a bit, and right now it's owned by a company called Clarivet Analytics, which maintains the Science Citation Index, Social Science Citation Index, and Arts and Humanities Citation Index. And to be included in this year database is most prestigious and reputable, and they have a very strict inclusion criteria. And second list that we can follow to find if a journal is reputed is Scopus list, which is owned by Elsevier, which is one of the largest scientific publishers in the world. And it has a much larger list than the Web of Science. And this is also a subscription-based service like the Web of Science, but the it has offered pre-preview version of the list, and you can quickly find if a particular journal is in this list or not. Next, I'm going to be talking about how to measure the overall importance of a journal. And there are some parameters. We are all familiar with impact factor. I'm going to be talking about that a bit. And there are some other journal matrices as well that we can use to objectively compare a journal while submitting a paper. So the journal impact factor, as I mentioned, it's maintained in the journal citation reports published by Clarivate Analytics, which is the official impact factor score. And Dr. Mainul mentioned that some journals, they claim fake impact factors in their website. So typically we would that the impact factor itself is defined by the Clarivate Analytics list, and it's defined as the number of citations of that journal in last 2 years and the number of publications in last 2 years, the ratio of these two. And this is the traditional and most widely accepted measure of journal prestige. And most people in the academic world know about this impact factor and use it widely. And since it's used widely, I can show some use and misuse of this impact factor that's happening. Firstly, as I mentioned, this is a objective measure of journal prestige. So if you have two journals of similar field, if one journal has a higher impact factor than the other, we can objectively say that maybe the higher impact factor journal is more prestigious, which is fine. It can also be used for a librarian if there is a limited budget and a librarian is choosing which journal to subscribe for the library. They can use this impact factor to sort of make an objective decision. It's also extremely misused for a tool of academic evaluation. And as we know that it's widely used now for tenures, grants, promotions, and funding. And this use is typically incorrect because the impact factor gives a quality of an entire journal and the average quality of the papers, not an individual quality of papers. So if I say that you're judging me for a position, you don't need to judge me as I am a faculty of BUET. You have to see in my personal contributions in the scientific field. So that's one of the major misuse of impact factor that's happening right now. There are some cautions that we must use while using the impact factor. Firstly, the absolute value of an impact factor of a journal is meaningless, and a journal of impact factor 2 would be not very impressive in a field of microbiology. But if it's a specialty journal, which specifically says about a disease-specific journal or a disaster management, it might have a lower impact factor because it deals with a specific problem. And disciplinary trends are very different, and they should not be compared. If there is a field that is actively researched and it becomes quite hot, for example, the field of plasmonics in nanophotonics, it became very hot at one point. So that would definitely get more citations than a more matured field. And impact factor is also not relevant in certain areas. For example, in artificial intelligence, computer science, data science, some conference proceedings are much more prestigious, and conferences are the principal form of communicating the research. And there is also this debate that not all having an impact factor doesn't make a journal completely unworthy. And there are almost 50% of journals that doesn't have an impact factor, but they sometimes have good results published that are later discovered. And small and specialized journals, they might have a lower impact factor than a general field journal. And specifically journals that publish tutorials, review articles, they tend to have a much skewed higher impact factor than journals that simply publishes scientific results. And this causes because the impact factor is widely affected by a few highly cited publications. So if we see the citation frequency of papers, we can see that there are a few extremely high cited papers. If one of these paper is published in a journal, that can severely skew the journal's impact factor. And there is another controversy that the citations over the years do not contribute to impact factor. So a paper that may be steadily cited over a course of 10 years, that may not contribute to the impact factor of a journal. So there are different ways to mitigate these problems, to calculate impact factor with longer years to see the trend. We'll now see some of the other parameters after this. And lastly, there is the problem of impact factor, that all citations are equally weighted. So if you the International Journal of Research and Review, that counts as one citation. And if you have a citation from Nature for your paper, it still counts as one citation. So this creates some problems. And there are some other matrices that tries to mitigate these biases and problems. Firstly, there is the site score parameter that is maintained by Elsevier through their Scopus database. And this is calculated with also all citations are given equal weight, but this is calculated over a period of 4 years. So this is very similar to impact factor, but it shows the average trend for a longer period. Next, there is the source normalized index of per paper, or SNIP, which is calculated so that the citations are normalized by the field. And this removes the bias that one field might have higher number of citations than another number of field which has lower citations. And this is also less prone to manipulation by the journals. There is the database called SciMago, which is freely available, which uses the Scopus database. And we have all used the Google search. And if you, those of you who are familiar how it works, it uses an algorithm called PageRank, which is discovered by its founder, Larry Page. And typically, Google, when you search, suppose Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, what Google does is it tries to find that how many websites containing the words are linking to the master website. So, and how many important websites are linking to a particular website. And it gives a different number of weight to more important websites such as Wikipedia or some news article than a spam site. So SciMago uses a similar approach. They give higher weightage to more prestigious journals than lower tier journals. And this is calculated. This indicates which journals are more likely to have articles cited by prestigious journals. And there is the eigenfactor and article influence score. These are also similar to SciMago JR ranking, which gives greater weight to citations from prestigious journals and calculated over 5-year period. So these are the comparison of some journal matrices. So we have impact factor, site score, SciMago JR, and source normalized impact per paper. And just to give you an idea of how the formulas are calculated. So there is also the quartile rank of a journal. So each matrix can be used to determine how prestigious the journal is. Typically, if you take the total 100% of the journals and you can divide them into 4 parts or 4 quarters. So the top 25% journals, they're considered tier 1 or Q1 journals. Top 50% or they are considered the from 50 to 74%, they're considered the tier 2 or Q2 journals. Top 75% or 25 to 49, they're considered Q3 and so on. So this quartile ranking, each of these matrices can be used to determine quartile ranking. Scopus maintains its own quartile ranking. SciMago JR maintains their own quartile ranking, and so on. If you want to identify which journals are in which databases, there are some websites. So you can use, for example, Web of Science. They have their webofknowledge.com, which is a subscription based. If you're for most Bangladeshi institutes, we don't have, unfortunately, subscriptions of Web of Knowledge. So there is the master journal list of Clarivate. You can use it to quickly find if the journal is available or not in the Web of Science database. And for Scopus, you can also use their website, scopus.com, or you can use the SciMago website, which is SciMago JR. You can use it for free, and it also gives you some insights into the journal and their matrices. It's important to note that journals are often matrices can be updated, so you can need to always look into the latest parameters. And there are some journal selection tools. I'm going to little highlight about this. So typically the larger publishers, they have their own journal finders such as Elsevier, Springer, or EndNote. And there are some commercial editing services that can also suggest based on what your text is, they can suggest which journal might be appropriate for you. There is a caution, however, that finally it's your paper and you need to determine which journal is more appropriate for you. And typically, if you use a service, there is a chance that Elsevier would want to push your paper to a journal that is lower cited or lower impact, and then try to get it published there so that their lower tiered journals can get higher rankings. And lastly, I want to highlight on this slide that many of us, it's important to get published in high impact journals and highly prestigious journals, but impactful research is much more important than the journal impact factor or journal prestige. So if you do good research, you would be recognized in the long run. So this is an example that was given to us by Dr. Leo Isaki, who's a Nobel laureate in physics in 1973. I had the privilege of attending his Hope meeting talk in 2011. So he said that he wrote a paper on semiconductor superlattice formation, and he submitted it into physical review, the original version. And this is the review result that he received, that the paper is too speculative and it has no new physics. It's very disheartening. So physical review is obviously one of the most prestigious journals of the physics community. Then he submitted this journal to this paper to an internal journal. So this is IBM Journal of Research and Development, and it almost sounds like a predatory journal if it was called International Journal of Research and Development anyway. So so this is published in 1970, Superlattice and Negative Differential Conductivity in Semiconductors. And if you go to Google Scholar, this paper has been cited by 4,697 times already. And the work for which he got the Nobel Prize, the Isaki tunnel diode, that work is cited only 167 times. So it really came down to how impactful the research is, and it ultimately got a recognition. So this is what I wanted to share. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Wow, thank you, Sajid. Thank you very much for the nice presentation, and it was really resourceful. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Shams, for the very insightful presentation. I'm really proud of my colleagues of NYAB. Really, all these three presenters, Dr. Manuel, Dr. Sajid, and Dr. Shams, made wonderful presentations. And I myself was reached by their presentations. Now, I would like to request our knowledgeable members, the panelists, first of all, Professor Mohammad Ataul Karim sir, to deliver his opinion, his comments, his suggestions, anything else, any criticism on the slides, about the slides, or anything about else. So I request Professor Ataul Karim sir, and we are sorry that our time is a bit limited. We allocate 10 minutes, sir, for you to deliver your speech. Professor Ataul Karim.
Assalamu alaikum. It will be much shorter, I can assure you. First, I was so impressed by the three presentation, and I know I was privy to examine two of the presentation last night because I received them advanced copies. They are so thoroughly done. And one I just received a few hours ago. Again, it's also very thoroughly done. So what I wanted to kind of tell is, I think the last speaker kind of summed it up all, is that you start from the right side and don't go too far to the left or the red side. So I will try to help make a case perhaps slightly different while staying true to the metrics and to where we need to actually publish and where we should not. So whether we like it or not, I checked out Scopus last night. In 2020, it lists 34,100 journals in all possible areas, possibly the largest base in 2020. Despite that 34,000 journals, which have citable records, one thing should be clear: there is no shortage of publishing in the right kind of journals. That's number one point. Questions were raised about the corporate control of the journals, such as Elsevier or Springer-Verlag. And these are real issues. There's no question about it. In my universities over the last 7-10 years, and all the years that I knew even before I came here, is every year I'm fighting the battle of how less money I'm going to give to the library. And then the librarian is trying to make a decision which journals they need to subscribe for one more year. In the case of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so therefore all universities have ganged up together and we buy in bulk. Anything bought by, for example, Boston University would be available with me. Anything I subscribe will be available, let's say, to MIT or Harvard, as the case may. So these are there are states, particularly California and Massachusetts, who have begun the trend of fighting the corporate monopoly on books and journals. Now, if I go beyond that a little bit, and I want to narrow down to Bangladesh, because that's where the majority of the attendees are. And this particular site was already cited. It was called Bangla Journal Online. Though was not stated, but I have been tracking this Bangla Jol for a little more than 15 years. So in 2011, this site listed 73 journals. 10 years later, by 2021, it lists 143 journals as of this morning. That's literally double in Bangladesh alone, in that particular website. Of these 143 that exist, I want to give you some statistic for us to understand that of these 143, only about 9 to 10, so that's like 1/15 number of journals, even which are possibly not predatory, only about 1/15 of this journal are listed either or could be classified as quartile 3 or quartile 4. The only exception was a particular journal, which happens to be Journal of Health, Population and Nutrition, which is ranked actually in quartile 1. And this is published by ICD-BRD. This particular journal within the past 3 years has actually been taken over by National Institute of Health in the United States. You can take that. So about 1/15 of these journals are barely either in Q3 or Q4. Now, I want to go a little bit farther and deep in it to understand that 57 of 143, that's 40% of these are published by the universities. 17 of these 143, as of this morning, no longer publishes. 8 are from Dhaka University, 8 from Rajshahi University, 3 from Stanford, 2 from Jahangirnagar University, 2 from Chittagong University, and then there is a whole slew of the remaining journals. 1Cs and 2Cs are from every types of schools and colleges. Alphabetically, you can start with Anwar Khan Modern Medical College and keep on going down this whole list. Now, I think what I wanted to tell, because I also graduated from Dhaka University, I have a sensitivity, so I went and checked his website. Its website actually lists there are 17 journals that this university produces, 17. Although Bangla Jol lists only about 8. So there are another 9 journals that Bangla Jol does not know. The tragic part is of these 17 journals that are coming out of Dhaka University, my alma mater, only one is associated with citable documents. Rest are not. So where I'm going with all of that, so as you are trying to figure out how to stay on the right side and don't go to the red side, here are my personal suggestions. And I think one of the audience member texted me, and so I'm responding to it. Typically, if the journal is produced by a professional society, you can bet a little bit more that there will be non-predatory journals. Most likely they are managed by and run and peer reviewed by the type of people we want that they should be peer reviewed. However, as I say this, when I say professional societies, and I know the first speaker or second speaker cited gave some examples of IEEE, OSA, SPIE, PubMed, and gave many of these professional societies, and they're in every different discipline. In Bangladesh, other than the 57 of 143, so 60% of the journal even listed in Bangla Jol, they are not produced by universities and colleges. They are, in my view, have a little bit more respect than those that are produced by universities and colleges, Dhaka University included. And all of these goes back, unfortunately, to a Dhaka University ordinance of 1973. Nobody wants you to talk about it because it is very emotionally touched. But I'll tell you that our slide in journal and reputation and promotion and tenure goes back to this singular ordinance. And since 1973-74, almost every other university, including the University Grants Commission, has embraced this particular ordinance that guides who can be hired, who can be promoted, what is needed to be promoted and not. And so these are driving, long before the digital age came in, as to why we are seeing this plethora of journals. So again, I just want to kind of voice what the 3 speakers said. Again, I thank them very much. And I will join my 3rd speaker who said, we want to be aware and stick to the right columns and not submit ours to the left column. You might see some of the young friends might think it's pretty easy, but I can assure you, based on my experiences throughout life, you're going to get caught. It's just a matter of time. Even if you don't get caught, I believe you will get caught to your own soul. But literally, professionally, these are not something productive that you want to, especially the younger people. You have a bright future, a long future ahead of us. So I would request everyone not to get colored into this fast publishing track record, for which Bangladesh seems to be now a mecca of the many neighboring countries. Just for the heck of it, I picked up one of those journals today. Don't want to name this particular journal. Well, it's being managed by the editor is from one of the universities in the Bangladesh. But then it says its corporate office is in Houston, Texas. And I think all the symptoms that we got from the three speakers, it will not take too long for you and I to figure out which is predatory and which are not. So I wish you well. And I think great groundwork has been done by our three speakers. I thank them profusely. And I'm glad that I was able to learn a lot from these three. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Atal sir. Really inspiring speech. And right now, we'll come back again to you, sir, with some questions from the audience. But right now, I'd like to invite Professor Muhammad Ashraful Alam to deliver his speech, his comments and thoughts on the slides or on anything else on this topic. May I welcome Professor Ashraful Alam.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
First of all, just like Professor Karim, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to actually not so much to speak, but to join and listen to the three wonderful talks. Frankly, I don't think about predatory journals often. We are often focused on research. There are plenty of deep problems to work on. And we know the journals that we wish to publish. So therefore, I don't think about it often. But this has been an eye-opening experience for me. You know, the job of a panelist is to sort of either deepen the discussion in some way or broaden the discussion. So you have already heard from Professor Karim about sort of a more specific Bangladeshi context of the Bangla journals and his advice regarding this. I'd like to broaden it a little bit and more come from a more historical angle. You know, the best way to answer this question, where not to publish, is by answering the question that why we publish. Of course, as you know, that publications come in different forms. Everybody publishes. Even the coronavirus, they publish their DNA. The cave paintings in France, that's also a type of publication. The edicts of Emperor Ashoka on stones, that's publication. And obviously the books from Aristotle to all other big scholars and all, those are publications of different sorts. So everybody publishes. But the publication in the journal form has a very specific history. And I think the problems that we see in the modern world is embedded or was present in the birth of this journal movement. The first journal was published in 1666. The same year that we sort of we hear that Apple dropped on Newton's head, and in that same year that he came up with the laws of motions that we know about, the theory of gravitation, calculus, and all these things. And so this is in 1660. The same year there was this horrendous pandemic going on, and the Royal Society that 1666 started this journal publication. It came from three things. One was the East India Company because there were so many people going all across the world, both the Dutch and the British East India Company, the flood of new type of knowledge coming from all over the world was sort of flooding in the Royal Society. So they wanted things to be communicated more efficiently. The second was, of course, the books. People used to publish books, but that used to take many, many decades before they published, and many times authors died before the book was ready for publication. And the other form was sending letters. As you know, people used to send letters to each other, just like sending emails. And in those days, and therefore that was also very inefficient, because Newton's letter to somebody else maybe just read by a few people. So journal was an efficient sort of response at that time. But the reason, so this was a good thing, good side of the journal, that it will be more efficient, that later the discussions will be published more compactly. But as you know, from the very beginning, the people who pushed for the publication was not a scientist. He had a printing press, and his goal was to make money, and he got a king's edict, king's charter, that he will be able to publish without competition for a certain number of years. And his main motivation was, of course, making money, not communicating per se the great sciences. Of course, that can happen simultaneously. And then second thing it started was this elite class of elites and gatekeepers. And as you know very well, how Newton, for a long period of time when he was the president of the Royal Society, how he sort of politically manipulated the process and sort of to get more credit. He already had much, but still more credit for the work he did. I'm bringing up all this because this idea that journals can be a non-profit organization simply cannot exist. Even the archive that is well respected and all, Cornell University has to spend a humongous amount of money to keep them alive. So journal will by definition will be a economic and financial, it will have that angle, and it will always have, even the best journals would have a elitist and gatekeepers type of things, which will also prevent from people from publishing in these journals unless you are from certain class of universities, certain types of association you can prove. So that makes getting to the very right, as Professor Karim was saying, extreme right, let's say Science and Nature or Proceedings of National Academy publishing so difficult. So I will just conclude with two things. I think this was already sort of alluded to in Professor Tariq's talk. I think I worry about this type of predatory journals for two reasons. One is sort of when you spend a lot of my time and money and trying to sort of get a paper ready and get published. And previously, when I was younger, there is no Google. So therefore, if you published in a journal which was not indexed or which was not available easily, then that work was essentially lost, as if the work has never been done. And so that was a big concern. After Google, I'm no longer sure that that concern any longer exists. Whether you publish in a predatory journal or not, I can find it in Google, and most of the time when I'm searching through something, looking for some material, I don't really pay attention to what journal it is. I can look at the abstract, and in a few minutes I can check whether the work is good or not. And so as a consumer, Google helps me to sort through or sift through a lot of material. So as a consumer, I'm not really that much affected. But what is really the real trouble, and that is what I want to conclude with, is this loss of culture of excellence. That's the more insidious or pernicious effect of publishing in lower quality journals. As we all know that excellence breeds excellence. And this is why you will always see that a group of people always emerge together. Excellent people emerge together. When you think about Socrates, you will see also Plato and Aristotle coming very close together. When you think about Schutten-Bosch Shatyen Bose cannot arise on their own. Shatyen Bose has to have Meghnad Shah, C.V. Raman, Jagadish Chandra Bose, all in the same group, in the close proximity. Because when you write, you do not write so far, you write also for the respect of your colleagues. You know, when Rabindranath Thakur, when he comes, he cannot come alone. There are also Nazrul with Jivanananda Das, with Buddhadev Basu, with this Amiya Shah. And so therefore a whole set of people come together because they sort of define an internal culture of excellence. And just like excellence breeds excellence, mediocrity also breeds mediocrity. If you see your colleagues getting promoted after publishing in a third-rate journal, after a while, you sort of also start doing the same thing. And the students who are with you, they begin to sense the similar type of, that you don't really want to ask the hard questions. You don't want to wake up 6 o'clock in the morning or in the middle of the night thinking about a science problem. You are just trying to get promoted and get a little bit of salary rise here and there. And then you begin to justify that the students are not good, investments are poor, and gradually you begin to expect a little less of yourself. And I think this loss of ambition and loss of imagination is the true cost of publishing in a culture of publishing in a journals that are not really top rated. And that is what I would like to end with, that, all this matrix, all these numbers and all these are of course helpful, but we all know why we publish in a lower ranked journals. The same people, if they went to MIT, they would be publishing in a different type of journals, because they would be working a little harder, they will be thinking a little, and they will be hoping to get recognition and prestige from their colleagues. And this is what I think we need to be particularly careful about. So that's all I had. Thanks again for the opportunity. And as always, it's a great pleasure to attend this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ashraful Alam, for your nice presentation. Actually, this is inspiring, really inspiring. The last few sentences are really, really amazing to us. Actually, we are right here. We are facing numerous problems. First of all, not only all the young researchers are doing became crazy to publish a huge number of papers to enhance the number of papers. This is not true for only for the young researchers. Even some older researchers, some experienced researchers are still doing the same thing from here, and their students are being inspired also. So when I see that a professor from here is publishing news of an article of his published article in Facebook status, first of all, he is writing, this is a Q1 journal, imperfectory is this. Without writing the content of the paper, he is writing the metric of the journal that is ultimately inspiring his students to go to the pace of metric, go to the pace of Q1, Q2, Q3, this, such kind of things. So at the end of the year, a professor is writing, I have published 10 papers, 20 papers. So these are things are actually creating a bad culture in our country. That's why we are very actually shocked, and we think that is somehow our responsibility to make some awareness so that our young researchers know the true things, know the right practice. So that's why actually this is the main objective of the organization of this kind of webinar. And sir, thank you very much for your words. Right now, I'd like to invite Professor Tariq Rahman. He's working actually on journals, metrics, and other things. He's very experienced, and I welcome Professor Tariq Rahman for delivering his speech. Professor Tariq Rahman.
Thank you very much, Professor Basit. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, yes.
All right. I'm sorry, my voice is a little down because I'm having fever, but still I shall try to say a few things. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me and joining this session. I have really learned quite a bit today, which I did not think in the past, although I was working in this area for some time, but still there are many things that I learned today, especially with the working group of Abdullah Shams, Professor Abdullah Shams, and then insights from Professor Athaul Karim and Muhammad Ashraful Alam and so on. So thank you very much. And it is, it is a very good thing for me that you put me at the end, because I don't have to say anything actually, because most of the things are already covered by all of you. So I can simply say thank you very much, and then let's go for the question and answer session. That would be easier, maybe. But anyway, I would like to highlight a few things, which is my kind of favorite area, which is a gray area of this predatory journal issue. And that there are always some gray area, like the spectrum Professor Abdullah Shams was showing there. There is a green to red and then some gray area there. And in this gray area, if I can name you, with my personal experience, few things that, a few years ago, one of my students, she wanted to have a paper published, and then she needed that for her graduation. But her paper was not accepted, rejected by a number of journals. And the requirement from our university was that it has to be published in a impact factor journals. The journal must have an impact factor. So she was hunting, for some journal which has impact factor and she can publish it. And the reason she was not able to publish in a good journal is because she needed few experiments to do, but she doesn't have time as well. Because our requirement is that we have to have a graduate on time, which is called GOT, and very specific time for scholarship. And at the same time, we have to come up with a number of publications. So at the end, I called her and I told her that find a journal where you can pay the open access fee and then submit it. And then she came up with the solution. She gave me a name, which has an impact factor of 3+, and the paper was accepted in 3 weeks' time, which has an impact factor of 3.4 and above. Now, is this journal a predatory journal? If you ask with any criteria, rigorous review process, editorial team, they do not have extensive soliciting emails and so on, it is not a predatory journal at all. But still, if I look at the outcome and the way they handle the paper, I am a bit confused about it. At the same time, if you go to other journals, for example, if you look at Nature Communication, their article processing fee is $5,500 and above, more than that. So if you look at those journals, you shall see that the more they have impact factor, higher their article processing fee. Is this a predatory in nature in their approach, or is it really they need that amount of money because they have a higher impact factor? So these kind of questions actually, put me in a confusion that there is a, really a gray area to define what is predatory journal and what is not. And this is why, Dr. Mainul showed one slide that Nature come up with an article that they said that there is no definition of predatory journal. And the reason, and that is a reality, that there is no actual definition of it. And the basic reason is that the article processing fee charged by these famous journals, and sometimes the way of the rejections is not always fair. There was a paper which I remember they published it, having a survey among the people who published their papers in the predatory journals. One of the most common reasons they showed is that the Western journals do not accept their paper easily. That is why they have to, resort on those predatory journals. So there are many practical issues which are basically, suffering, causes a lot of sufferings to many of us. Now, the point that I also wanted to highlight that why we publish in the predatory journals, which was, mostly answered by Professor Ashraful Alam, that the reason we publish it because we see that our colleagues are publishing it and they're getting promotion, they're getting, a job very easily. So we are, kind of competition, behind the scene. So we have to survive this competition. If my colleague has 300 publications and I do not have, as a professor, then I feel inferiority complex. that, what kind of situation that I am in, that I'm a professor, I do not have 300 publications, but my colleagues have. My colleague who supervised a master's student, and at the end of the master's degree, the student published 12 papers, and this is the reality. But I was not able to publish even 4 papers during my PhD. I did not allow my PhD student to publish more than 2 papers because it doesn't work in that way in my evaluation. So, this kind of reality is there. So the question is that the gray area is there. And the second question is that why predatory journal exists is because of us, because of the academician. If you look at ourselves, that we use those numbers of those journals. University vice chancellors, they look at the CV and they say, oh yeah, this guy has 200 papers. So he is more eligible for these positions than the other guy who has only 50 or 30 papers there. So it is the university vice chancellor, it is the university teachers, lecturers, or researchers. Because of their actions in one or another way, these predatory journals exist. And if you look at this, although Professor Ashraful Alam again went back to the history of these economic viability and how these economic venture or corporate issues about the journal existence. But still, if you look at it, that whenever there is an opportunity of having more and more money, earn more and money using this venue, why not? People will definitely go for it. I can give you a very, interesting practical example that a few years ago, a group of people from China, they approached me and they told me that they will give me around 20,000 Malaysian ringgit, which is $5,000 US, for one paper to be published. And the idea is that they will give me the data from China, and only thing I have to do is that I have to write the paper for them, and then I shall be one of those authors, and they will be the corresponding authors and so on. And then the main reason for them to ask me is that so that I can write it in a way that it will be published in a impact factor journal. So now those are the people who are working in university in China, and they are coming to us who are also working in university. So at the end, I rejected those company, but my colleague accepted them. And he worked with those people, and then eventually he published those papers, and those venture actually were successful there. So now all the examples that I'm giving you to point out that it is us who are actually responsible for all of those things. And it is, if you look at it, young generations are tempted or are forced to do it. And if you look at the older generations, the policymakers, if we are strict at that level, younger generations will never do that. So definitely we need to make awareness among them, and that's what you are doing. This is a very wonderful thing, very important thing to do. But at the same time, what I think most important for us is that we need to tell the policymakers, the authority, that what to count and what not to count. Do we really have to count that who has the 200 publications for a job, or do we really have to think that who has the ability to do research or not? So those are the things that are more important to control this issue of predatory journal. So, and this is one of the reasons that recently we published a paper which we call as an author categorization. So in this paper, we actually proposed an index that we call as Author Performance Index, or API. So using this index, what we basically proposed is that if you want to evaluate an individual or a researcher for his contribution in the scientific world, you have to see that what was the actual contribution in a paper or not. So that is why we have categorized these authors, and then when we categorize it and then we calculate his actual contribution, and then you can see that out of 200 publications, basically what is his actual contribution, and then use it there. So this is how that we cannot get rid of the predatory journals. We cannot simply stop our young generations not to publish because our older generations are already having 300, 400 papers in their CV. So they are naturally going after that number. They will be going after that number. We cannot stop it. That is a reality. And there are another reality is that today there are 114 journals published from the Bangladesh, which was 10 years ago, half of it. It will increase. definitely it will increase, because we have now, more than 100 universities in the country, and we have how many lecturers. The number of lecturers and professors are increasing there, and all of them, they will need publications. And Nature and Science and Cell or PNAS and Lancet are not going to publish their papers. So definitely those journals, number of those journals are also going to be increased a lot. So the total problem is with us, with our policymakers. That is what the root of the problem, if not the total problem. Root of the problem is with us. And if we can minimize, or if we can come up with a very, very controlled policy to calculate, to measure the impact of an individual as a scientist, as an author of a scientific article, then I think it will be easy for us to control the predatory journals. With that note, I thank you once again for this wonderful session, and I have really learned a lot. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tarikur Rahman, for your advice and suggestions. Okay, right now, actually, we'll start our discussion session, and I must apologize if there is anyone from other countries. I'll just say that now we'll use the bilingual. The audience can ask us any question in Bangla or in English. So I apologize. If any foreigner is there, you can also ask questions in English, but some of the audience may ask the question in Bangla, so we'll accept it. So I have some questions already in the chat box. First of all, we'll go through them. Okay, and in the meantime, if anyone would like to ask any question, please raise your hand. So first question was there from the audience. Can someone comment on professional society journals versus published, he meant, I think, commercial based journal? So maybe Professor Atal Karim sir may answer this question. So comment on professional society journals versus commercial journals, actually. So you give some hint in your presentation. If you can elaborate it in Bangalore.
Yes, so I'll give an example maybe from my own field, that if I were to take a chance to publish my work in an IEEE journal or American Physical Society journal or Optical Society of America journal or SPIA journal, I can be rest assured that these are not predatory. On the other hand, even within commercial side too, there are a large number of journals which are not predatory. So I could not wholesale dismiss the commercial journals. I know there is a movement behind the scenes, that there's a movement to asking people not to edit or work on the editorial board of commercial journals. I think that movement is not going to succeed, because over time, the commercial entities has been recruiting more and more successfully, more and more academicians to push higher integrity manuscripts and publications. So I don't think we can wholesale just say, I'm not going to publish in Elsevier journals or Wiley journals or Springer-Verlag journal. I don't think we are going to do that, or Taylor Francis journal. I think a lot of us will do, because many of those journals are not predatory, you can be rest assured about it. On the other hand, which are predatory journals is very clear. It does not take a genius to figure it out. And I think that's what our speakers kind of highlighted, so that we avoid the extreme red on the left side of the screen. And I think you yourself gave the hints as to how to figure it out. I mean, you just get one or two emails and you figure out right away this is not where it is. But Professor Alam kind of told it all. It's when we see what is happening around amongst my colleagues, amongst my senior, that's where I'm driven, and I don't want to push myself to excellence, and I get focused on how many did I publish last week. Once we do that, then we have sacrificed our real purpose of research. And I think That's in the end is a question between you and your soul. And I am going to revisit the same thing. The situation in Bangladesh was not as green until it was 1973, because that ordinance kind of defined who could be recruited, who could be promoted, what is going to take promotion, which party should you belong to, what color panel you are. All of those things are becoming more important in your progression. On the other hand, I'm heartened by the fact, especially younger faculty members, and I've visited some of the labs and groups in different universities, including yours, if you remember that, is that I'm so impressed by what you are driving, despite what is happening at the higher level of the university. If you are expecting miracle to happen from there, I have to be a little bit pessimistic on that. This is not going to happen in Bangladesh. You cannot count that those changes are going to come from the top, because most of the people from the top, they were recruited with wrong reason for wrong political alliance. How do you expect them to make any change in any of the ordinance? It will not happen. Don't want to bore you. Just to prove this point, some 10 years ago, I took every chancellor of the main 4 or 5 universities, and I tried to figure out, thanks to Google, how many ever published anything? Where did they publish? Did anybody cited that work? And I can tell you, you cannot expect miracle from that group of people, because they have not done anything that you and we people are shooting for. So again, I want to encourage that. Don't wait on the top level to make the changes. I don't think they will, but just as Professor Ashraf Alam said that, if you hold higher standard, you will force and push your neighbor, people you're associating with, and you rise together. It's going to take time. You have begun a process, and I sincerely believe it's going to take time. And again, Professor Alam said a lot of historical facets. And only yesterday I saw on Physics Today another article of why this particular scientist who was in England, why did he move from New Zealand to England and to Canada back to England? Because he was trying to have fast communication with his colleague before somebody else does, because he was also trying to beat somebody else on the whole area of radioactivity. But that's besides the point. I think we have lost sight. Institutions are doing that. And again, I also have to say that many institutions are already aware of these things. So it's not quite correct to say promotion tenure process is just looking for impact factor-based journal, because it does not measure that work. So while it may be good for a candidate to say that, okay, the impact factor is this, but they also have to say how many times your work was cited, how many times it was self-cited by yourself, how many times did you, how many times it was cited by others, what was the trend over the last 5 years, 6 years. I think those are the things that gives confidence to the promotion process. But that's only when people are looking objectively. In the case of Bangladesh, unfortunately, this isn't happening. But again, I just want to tell you, young folks, you are the one who are going to change this country forever and can. And don't trust those old folks like us, because they are not going to make any difference. They are set on their ways because it's comfortable. They want no challenges, no fear. And I have gone to many of these labs. Most of the labs are hidden because nobody's supporting them lab, but amazing works are coming out of it. So again, I thank you very much. Please keep on working. And I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So you visited our lab, and our students are really inspired by your presence
Yes,
there.
I
And
did.
still we remember it, your visit in our lab. So we have another question actually. So I'm asking again, if anyone would like to ask any question directly, please raise your hand. I have another question. Is there any standard way to follow for getting more citations for my paper? So someone from the audience asked, so may I ask Professor Ashraful Alam to answer this question? Is there any standard way to follow for getting more citations for my paper? Professor Ashraful Alam, are you there? Probably he is not there. Okay. So, okay.
Yeah.
I think I can
Oh,
answer.
he's right there. Okay, good.
Yeah, you know, the way I think about how to get more citation is what Dirac once mentioned, was that the farther you look back in answering a question, the farther it in the future will your work survive. That is to say that when I work on a problem, I start with a very specific thing, very answer to a very specific question. What is the self-heating in a FinFET transistor and this and that? But then once the answer begins to sort of crystallize and gel a little, I begin to look back 30, 40, 50, 60 years in the literature to see how where there are interesting or innovative ideas that can answer a more grander question. Not only that, yes, I'm answering the question in a narrow context of a FinFET transistor and self-heating, but is that the answer to that question, is it sort of, the question has to be timely, but the answer has to be timeless. That is the essence of getting a lot of citation at the end of the day, that if your answer inspires others to sort of build on top of your work, that your work by itself is not the end, but it is the beginning, a stepping stone for a lot of other people build their work, that is when your work will be remembered and cited often. So this is, I think, the fundamental principle. Of course, there are other strategies that you can use. You should have your LinkedIn strategy, with your student placement strategy, with your conference strategy, with your, your talks that you give, that strategy and the journal strategy all together, so that your work gets sort of broader exposure. But beyond the exposure, I think that what I said in the beginning, that the answer has to be deep and it has to be in some way timeless. Otherwise, the citation cannot go very far because others couldn't really build on top of your work. Why would they cite you? So that's it. That's all I had wanted to say.
Thank you very much. So probably I'm not seeing anyone is being interested to ask any question directly. May I change the language actually? আমরা একটু যদি বাংলা এবং যদি মনে হয় কেউ ইন্সপায়ার্ড হতে পারেন, বিশেষ করে আমাদের জুনিয়র রিসার্চার যারা, তারা যদি বাংলায় কোয়েশ্চেন করতে চান, আপনারা কেউ প্লিজ আপনারা বাংলাতে করতে পারেন, কোনো সমস্যা নেই। হ্যাঁ, আরেকটা কোয়েশ্চেন, খুব রিলেভেন্ট একটা কোয়েশ্চেন আছে, এটা আমরা একটু ডিসকাস করেছি, তারপর আমি আবার জিজ্ঞেস করতেছি একটু, যে one of the audience asked, does Q1, Q2, Q3 percentile matter so much in this situation? Maybe Professor Tariq Rahman, so you can add something, your comments. So this quarter actually, Q1, Q2, Q3, does it matter actually anything?
I think the answer is already given by,
Right.
previous discussion, that it's about the quality of the work, and this Q1, Q2, all those things are the journal metrics. It's not the metrics of the paper that you publish. It's not the quality of the paper that you are doing it. But the reality is that, although I humbly disagree with some of the points that some of you raised it, that the everywhere in the world is not following the same standard that you follow in United States or United Kingdom, right? So for example, even in Malaysia, even the topmost universities, they look at the issue that how many papers you have published in Q1 journals, and then how many times your paper is cited in, and so on. So all those things are, and how many papers also you are publishing there. So those things are counted there. So it really, depends on the university that where you are working and where you want to work. So this is how it works. I don't think that in my experience that everyone follows the same principle, whether they will count Q1 or they will not count it or not.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Just আমি একটু এক্সপেরিয়েন্স শেয়ার করি। আমি যে রিসার্চটা করি, আমার রিসার্চে আমার সবচেয়ে রিলেভেন্ট জার্নাল হচ্ছে, মনে করি জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্স, যেটা হচ্ছে আমেরিকান ইনস্টিটিউট অফ ফিজিক্স থেকে পাবলিশ হয়। তো আমার কাজগুলো আমি প্রথমেই চেষ্টা করি হয়তো জাস্ট জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড, আমি অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্স লেটার্সে পাবলিশ করতে পারি না, আমার তো এত পোটেনশিয়ালিটি নেই এখান থেকে, বাট আমি জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্সে পাবলিশ করতে পারি। বাট এবার আমার রিসেন্ট একটা কাজ আমি জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্সে সাবমিট করতে গেলাম, আমার স্টুডেন্ট হি ইজ অলসো টিচার অফ এ পাবলিক ইউনিভার্সিটি, আমার বলো স্যার এটা তো কিউটি জার্নাল। তো এটা কিউটি জার্নাল, আমার তার প্রমোশন আছে সামনে, ওইখানে যারা প্রমোশন এখন যারা আছেন তারা এখন ইমপ্যাক্ট ফ্যাক্টর বুঝেন, ওনারা জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্সের ইমপ্যাক্ট ফ্যাক্টর হচ্ছে 2 পয়েন্ট সামথিং, সে যে জার্নাল প্রেফার করছে ওদের ইমপ্যাক্ট হচ্ছে 4 পয়েন্ট সামথিং। বাট আমি আমার ভিতর থেকে আমি এখনো বিশ্বাস করি 4.6, আমাকে যদি বলা হয় দুইটা থেকে একটা চুজ করতে, আমি অবশ্যই 2.2 এর জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্স নিব, এটা কিউ2 হলে এটাই নিব আমি। বাট আমার স্টুডেন্টের জন্য আমাকে এটা মানে স্যাক্রিফাইস করতে হচ্ছে। বাট এই স্টেজটা সামহাও আমাদেরকে একটু মানে অ্যাকসেপ্ট করতে হবে, মানে আমাদের যারা আপনারা যেটা বলছেন যে আমাদের পলিসি মেকিং এ যারা আছেন, এই জিনিসটা যেন মানে আমাদের উপরে চেপে না বসে, যে এই ইমপ্যাক্ট ফ্যাক্টর এবং Q1 Q2 Q3। হ্যাঁ, আদারওয়াইজ আমি এখনো বিশ্বাস করি যে আমার কাজটা যদি জার্নাল অফ অ্যাপ্লাইড ফিজিক্সে পাবলিশ হতো, ওটার অডিয়েন্স কিংবা ওইখানে যদি একটাও সাইটেশন হয়, তা আমার কাছে মনে হতো যে রাইট অডিয়েন্সে যাবে, ওইখানে যে রিভিউয়ার আছেন তারা হয়তো রাইট রিভিউয়ার আমি পেতাম। হ্যাঁ, বাট এটা আমাকে জাস্ট এরকম এক্সাম্পল অনেক আছে, জাস্ট এক্সাম্পল আমার নিজের এক্সাম্পল দিলাম, দেয়ার আর লটস অফ এক্সাম্পলস। সো আমরা এই ব্যাপারটা থেকে আসলে একটু বের হতে চাই। আমি বিশেষ করে আমরা যখন আমরা ন্যাশনাল ইয়াং একাডেমিতে ডিসকাস করি, আমরা এটা খুব ভালোভাবে আমরা বিশেষ করে প্রফেসর আব্দুল সংস্কৃতি তারেক, যে আমরা যেটা বলি যে আসলে আমরা ম্যাট্রিক ইজ ওকে, ম্যাট্রিক আমরা কনসিডার করব, বাট ম্যাট্রিক যেন আমাদের উপর চেপে না বসে। এই ব্যাপারটাই আসলে মানে বিশেষ করে আতল করিম স্যার তো অনেক লেখালেখি করেন এবং অনেক জায়গায় স্পিচ দেন স্যার, এবং আমার বাংলাদেশের এমন ইনফরমেশন আছে যেগুলো আমরা জানি না, বাট হি হিমসেলফ নোজ দ্যাট ভেরি ওয়েল। তো স্যারকে রিকোয়েস্ট করবো এই ব্যাপারটা যেন স্যার একটু হাইলাইট করেন, বিশেষ করে আমাদের সিনিয়ররা যেন এই ব্যাপারটাতে একটু ইয়ে হন, যে আসলে আমার ছাত্রদের আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করে আমি স্যার কোন জার্নাল সাবমিট করবো, আমি ফার্স্ট বলবো প্লিজ সার্চ হুইচ ইজ দ্য মোস্ট রিলিভেন্ট জার্নাল ফর ইউর রিসার্চ, সবচেয়ে রিলিভেন্ট জার্নালটা কোনটা তোমার রিসার্চে তোমার কাজের ক্ষেত্রে, এটাই আমার ফার্স্ট আনসার থাকে। তো স্যার মানে কিছু অ্যাড করতে চাচ্ছেন না ফলকন স্যার, আপনি যদি কিছু অ্যাড করেন যে আসলে এই ট্রেন্ড থেকে আমরা কি করে বের হয়ে আসবো।
I had been doing exactly what you're doing as a researcher. I always did whatever you think is most relevant for your work. You already know which articles did you use to work on it. That's the best venue, because you are borrowing from work that was done by somebody else or many other people in a particular journal. That more likely is most appropriate. Yes, you can go still higher, but I think that's more appropriate. It also tells that that journal is likely going to publish work in that particular area. So that's partly our saying. As an administrator, I had a different kind of answer. And I've been doing it forever in Sabah. So a young faculty member comes and says, tell us how many papers I need to publish, what journal. And again, how do I know which journal is better for you or not? So my typical answer is go and figure out who in your department got the last promotion. And your goal is to beat that person. And if you can, more likely you are on the right track. But I will extend this further. For example, in the area of business, I found this is a information I did not know of it 10 years ago, that in the business world, what journal are you going to publish? It is not based on Elsevier or anybody. It is what is called ABDC journal, Australian Business Deans Association rated journal. I did not know of this. And they have Class A, Class B, Class C journals that gets cooked out by this Deans Association in Australia. And that these business journals essentially are considered by everywhere else, including in the business schools in the United States. I've checked with many business schools the same. So it's never the same, but I think people set on a particular criteria. Unfortunately, you can't deviate from that. Now, what is done by ABDC? I don't think you're going to find it in the College of Health Science or somewhere else. They may not have these criteria. But again, I just wanted to say, push ourselves. And I think the venue is the one where you think is the best journal, more likely where your references were actually published. That will give you a sense or comfort level that that's where more likely is your best venue. The question of publication charge and all of these things are going to come. Now things have changed, but I remember there are journals I submitted and all I made is a declaration later on that we are a non-profit organization and I have no money to pay for. That didn't stop me from publishing. In other words, once I gave some kind of declaration, I'm sure this day it may not work, but in my days this worked too. But I think looks like payment is a major thing. Even in the professional society governed journals, there is particularly a paid charge, let's say $100 or $150. These are genuine things. I don't think you can do without it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So we have another relevant question actually. Can a journal be identified predatory even they do not charge article processing fees? Maybe Professor Abdullah Shamsuddin Tariq, you can answer this question. Can it be still predatory if there is no FEC?
It's a very good question, actually, because, well, it is very difficult to run a predatory journal without charging anything to anyone. But it might be the case because I remember recently there was one of these Enrico Bucci in our group. He was looking at several thousands of predatory journals, and the lowest APC they had was $50. So it's not he couldn't find a zero APC predatory journal because but it could be the case that there is a predatory journal which is not charging from you but is charging from everyone else. Somehow it is waiving from you to gain a customer or something like that. So be aware of I would say you have to be aware of all the other aspects of these journals. And as we have been emphasizing, it's not a 0 or 1 decision whether a journal is predatory. It has many journals have some predatory aspects in it. Many have some areas where they are failing ethically. So it may be that. So just be aware of that. It is I would be surprised, but I think there can be exceptions. So be careful. I would just say be careful. It is unlikely to be the case, but it may be that it's a very poor journal, like very near the spectrum, on the red end of the spectrum, but not exactly in the red. It could be something like that when you find something.
Okay, well, sounds correct. We have another question. If anyone published a paper in a predatory journal by mistake, is it possible to publish it again by withdrawing that paper, or is there anything to do? So I think. Okay.
May I answer this?
Yes,
I have actually looked this up because I was discussing this with the kind of the world authority on these things is called COPE. The Committee on Publication Ethics, and their COPE guidelines, you can appeal to them on decisions like this. So they have a discussion document, but they don't yet have a consensus on this yet. So there are some suggestions that if you have published a work in a predatory journal and you realize later, you should be able to retract it, and you should be allowed to publish it elsewhere. But this is not something that all publishers would do. Most publishers would not accept that article. So it's very likely that it is wasted, very likely. But there is some discussion, and there are some people who feel that there should be a way out, but it's usually very difficult. So there is no consensus. And retractions is one area where predatory journals are very difficult. One of the telltale signs between a proper legitimate journal and a weak journal is that they would have a legitimate journal will have a proper retraction policy. Whether they have to use it or not is different, but they will have a clear-cut policy. But people have tried hard and been unable to retract their work from a predatory journal. So this is something, if you look before you submit, whether that journal has a retraction policy, that's also one area to look at if you want to go for this thing. But generally, I would say that still there would be very few publishers who would agree to accept your resubmitted, retracted work that has been once published with a predatory journal.
Oh, thank you, James. May I request Professor Atal Kunin sir to add something, to supplement something, because maybe it may be helpful for the young researchers so that they can actually.
So this is just an opinion, maybe.
Yes, please, sir.
Almost all professional societies have set policies called multi-submission. Even conferences will not accept a paper if you submitted the same into 2 or 3 conferences. So because of that, I think I am going to agree with the last speaker, is that majority of the journals will not accept you. However, in order to help you, I think if you can, that very work that kind of got lost, if you can work on it further, make additional enhancement, okay? And I could suggest that use that revised, enhanced manuscript to submit in a respectable journal. The worst they can do is reject it. But if they reject it, they're going to give us some great ideas as to what are missing in my paper. I have to say thank you very much for those great ideas, and I'm going to get back to it and improve upon it. So my suggestion is that if you thought the work is wasted, most likely it's wasted, please enhance that very work further now that you realize a little bit, and then submit it and go through the review process. And maybe you can go through 1 or 2 rounds, but it's going to come out as long as you're patient and you can keep on saying, thank you very much for that great suggestion. It'll work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. So again, our junior researcher যারা আছে আমি আপনাদের রিকোয়েস্ট করতে চাই, আপনারা যদি কেউ কোনো কোশ্চেন করতে চান ডাইরেক্টলি কোশ্চেন করতে পারেন এবং বাংলাতে করতে পারেন, কোনো সমস্যা নেই। Anyone, any junior researcher?
জুনিয়র রিসার্চেতে যদি কোনো কোয়েশ্চেন নাও থাকে, তো আমি একটা জুনিয়র রিসার্চের সঙ্গে অনুমতি পেলে একটা কথা বলতে চাই আর কি। সেটা হচ্ছে যে প্রফেসর করিম 1973 এর আর্টিকেলের কথা বলেছেন, এবং উনি এটাও বলেছেন যে ইট ইজ ভেরি চ্যালেঞ্জিং এই ধরনের প্রমোশন এবং রিক্রুটমেন্ট, এবং এই পুরো জিনিসটা চ্যালেঞ্জিং। কিন্তু ওই সঙ্গে উনি আরেকটা কথা বলেছেন, ওই জিনিসটা আমি একটু এমফাসাইজ করতে চাই, যে আসলে বড় একটা পুরো ইউনিভার্সিটিকে ঘুরায় দেওয়া অথবা পুরো রিসার্চ কালচারকে ঘুরায় দেওয়া, এইটা ডিফিকাল্ট। কিন্তু লোকাল এরিয়া অফ এক্সেলেন্স এবং লোকাল ইয়েতে এইটা কিন্তু অসম্ভব না। এইটার জন্য খুব ছোট আকারে নেতৃত্ব যথেষ্ট হতে পারে, অর্থাৎ কয়েকজন মিলে ঠিক করলো যে আমরা এই টপিকে করব। এবং এই জন্য আমি যেটা বলতে যাচ্ছিলাম, যে দুটো এক্সাম্পল আমি দিয়েছিলাম, যে কলকাতা ইউনিভার্সিটিতে যখন আশুতোষ মুখোপাধ্যায় উনি ভিসি ছিলেন, যখন প্রথম তৈরি হয়, তখন দেয়ার ওয়াজ নো এক্সপেকটেশন দ্যাট দিস উইল রিয়েলি বিকাম উনি একজন লয়ার, যে দিস উইল বিকাম এ ওয়ার্ল্ড ক্লাস প্লেস ফর ফিজিক্স রিসার্চ। কিন্তু মাত্র ওইখানে তো আরো অনেক কিছু হতে পারতো, ওই ইউনিভার্সিটিতে আরো অনেক কিছু হতে পারতো, হয়নি। যেটা হয়েছে যে কয়েকজন এক্সেপশনাল মানুষ, তারা তাদের নিজেদের মধ্যে থেকে জার্মান শিখেছে, জার্মানের আর্টিকেল গুলা ট্রান্সলেট করেছে, কোয়ান্টাম মেকানিক্স এর কথা বলছি, এবং নিজেদেরকে নিজে শিখিয়েছে। ইনফ্যাক্ট ওই এমবেসিতে যে আইনস্টাইনের বই যেগুলো ছিল, ওইগুলোতে যখন কেবল পাবলিশ হচ্ছে, সেগুলো ডিরেক্টলি পাওয়া যেত না। তো সেটা একটা। আর আরেকটা হচ্ছে বাংলা লিটারেচারের কথা তো আমরা সবাই জানি, যে 1880s কেউ কখনো ভাবেনি যে বাংলাদেশের লিটারেচার উড বি রিচিং দিস হাইট ইন দ্য নেক্সট 40 years। অল্প কয়েকজন মানুষ, তারা নিজেদের মতো কাজ করে, তারা দে পুট দ্য লিটারেচার ইন সাম এক্সেপশনাল প্লেস। তো এই জন্য আমি বলতে চাই যে বড় ইনস্টিটিউশনের অনিয়ম অথবা সমস্যা যেটার উপরে আমাদের কন্ট্রোল কম, সেটা নিয়ে হতাশ হওয়ার কোনো কারণ নেই। কেননা স্বপ্নগুলো নিজের থেকে ডাসতে পারে, আর অল্প কয়েকজন বন্ধু বান্ধব হলেই ইট ক্যান স্টার্ট এ প্রসেস যেখানে ইভেনচুয়ালি 50 বছর পরে সবাই তাদেরকে এক্সাম্পল দেখে ফলো করবে। তো এইটা আমি বলতে চাই, পার্সোনাল উদ্যোগটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট। আমরা যদি বলি যে বিভিন্ন কারণে বিভিন্ন ইয়েতে ইউনিভার্সিটি পলিসি কারণে হচ্ছে না, দ্যাট উইল বি অ্যান এক্সকিউজ, যেটা প্রবাবলি আমরা উই ক্যান থিঙ্ক অ্যাবাউট ইট লিটল বিট ডিফারেন্টলি। এটা অ্যাড করি।
আমি একটা জাস্ট আমাদের অনেকে এখনো আছেন ইয়াং রিসার্চার যারা, আমি যাদের চিনতেছি ওরা আমাদের স্টুডেন্ট। তো আমি একটা জাস্ট এক্সপিরিয়েন্স শেয়ার করতে চাই যে ফার্স্ট 1 year ব্যাক আমি একটা পাবলিক ইউনিভার্সিটির রিক্রুটমেন্ট কমিটিতে আমি ছিলাম এজ এ জুনিয়র প্রফেসর ধরে নিতে পারেন। আমার সাথে আরো সিনিয়র অনেক প্রফেসররা ছিলেন। আমি ফিজিক্স থেকে ছিলাম, কেমিস্ট্রি থেকে একজন খুব সিনিয়র প্রফেসর ছিলেন। তো রিক্রুটমেন্টে ছিল ফিজিক্সের অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট প্রফেসর পোস্টে। তো একজনই অ্যাপ্লিক্যান্ট ছিল। তো আমি যেহেতু সবাই ভিতরে ছিলেন, আমি ডিউ টাইমে আমার যেহেতু ফিজিক্সের যখন অ্যাপয়েন্টমেন্টের টাইম আসতো আমি ঢুকলাম। ঢোকার পরে আমাকে একজন সিনিয়র কেমিস্ট্রি প্রফেসর জিজ্ঞেস করলেন যে প্রফেসর বাসিত, ক্যান্ডিডেট এই হচ্ছে তার সিভি। তো সিভিতে তার 1 বছরে 10টা পেপার, 10 রিসার্চ আর্টিকেলস পাবলিশড ইন 1 year। তো আপনি কাইন্ডলি একটু দেখেন মানে পেপারগুলো। তো যিনি বলতেছেন কেমিস্ট্রি প্রফেসর, উনি খুব সিনিয়র এবং ভালো প্রফেসর, উনি ইজ এ ভেরি গুড রিসার্চার অ্যাকচুয়ালি। তো উনি সো মডেস্ট। তো যেহেতু ফিজিক্সের আমাকে এই দায়িত্বটা দিচ্ছেন, আমি দেখলাম যে না, কোন একটা জার্নালও পেলাম না আমি, যে জার্নালটা আমি যাদের নাম শুনেছি কখনো। একটা জার্নাল আমি পেলাম, বাংলাদেশের একটা জার্নাল। আমি দেখলাম ওইটাই সবচেয়ে রিকগনাইজড জার্নাল ওইখানে, আমি নাম শুনেছি কারো কাছ থেকে, বাট একটা জার্নাল আমি পেলাম না। ওই সিলেক্ট ছাত্রটার তার রেজাল্ট ভালো, সে ফিজিক্সও ভালো বুঝে। তো আমরা যেটা দেখলাম যে আলাপ করলাম তার সাথে, একদম খোলামনি আমরা আলাপ করলাম, এবং যেটা বুঝলাম যে তাকে কেউ কোনোদিন বলে নাই যে তুমি তার সাথে একটা কাজ, ওর সাথে একটা কাজ, ওর সাথে একটা কাজ, এরকম করে করে সে 10টা পেপারের লিস্ট করছে। এবং স্বাভাবিকভাবে ইউনিভার্সিটি দেখে খুব ইমপ্রেসড হয়েছে, তার সিভিটা তারা রেখে দিচ্ছে, তার ইন্টারভিউ নিচ্ছে। বাট এই 10টা পেপারে একটা পেপারও যদি সে ইফোর্ট দিত, একটা পেপারও সে লিখতো, আমি নিশ্চিত ওইখানে তার চাকরিতে হয়ে যেত। যেহেতু মানে আমি আমি জাস্ট কি আমি সহজ করে খুব সুন্দর করে তাকে বুঝিয়ে বললাম যে বাবা, তুমি যদি 10 জায়গায় 10 জনের সাথে কাজ না করে তোমার সুপারভাইজারের সাথে একটা পেপারের জন্য তুমি এফোর্ট দিতে 1 বছর, এবং এট দ্য এন্ড অফ দ্য ইয়ার একটা পেপার তোমার যদি পাবলিশ হতো, আমি তোমাকে রিকমেন্ড করতাম, ইয়েস, হ্যাঁ, ইউ আর অ্যাপয়েন্টেড ফর দিস পোস্ট। বাট এই 10টা পেপারই তোমার আসলে বিটা। তো এই জিনিসটা আমরা আমাদের ছাত্রদের খুব স্পষ্ট করে মানে একটু বোঝাতে চাই। আসলে নাম্বার কেউ না কেউ কখনো কোথাও মানে কিছু মানুষকে হয়তো ফাঁকি দেওয়া যাবে, কিছু মানুষকে হয়তো কখনো বোকা বানানো যাবে, যে কথা আমরা সবাই জানি, বাট সবসময় নাও যেতে পারে। সো আমরা আমাদের ইয়াংদের পোটেনশিয়ালিটি, বিশেষ করে আমি আমার ছাত্রদের দেখি তারা অনেক খুব ভালো ভালো কাজ করে ফেলে, বাট ওই যে মানসিকতা, মাইন্ডসেটটা, এটা আমাদের চেঞ্জ করাটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট, এবং আমরা সেটাই চেষ্টা করতেছি এবং করব। তো এই ব্যাপারে স্যার আপনাদের লাস্ট আমরা এই টোটাল ব্যাপারে আমাদের একদম ইয়াং স্টুডেন্ট যারা একদম ফ্রেশ, যারা আন্ডার গ্রাজুয়েট করতেছে 4th ইয়ারে, বা যারা মাস্টার্সে করতেছে, বা যারা আমেরিকায় বা অন্যান্য দেশে যাবে, ভালো ইউনিভার্সিটি পিএইচডি করতে যাবে, তাদের জন্য স্যার আপনারা যদি একটু কিছু বলেন আর কি। আশা বলছি আপনাকে দিয়ে শুরু করি আর কি। আপনি একটু কাইন্ডলি যদি বলেন তাদের জন্য যে আসলে তাদের কি করা উচিত, কিসের পিছনে তাদের ছোটা উচিত।
আসলে স্টুডেন্টদের ক্ষেত্রে বলছি, ওরা তো ঠিক জানে না অ্যাডভাইজার যেভাবে করে, হয়তো পিএইচডির সময় একটা প্রোগ্রাম লিখে নিয়ে এসেছিল, তখন হয়তো বললো যে ঠিক আছে তুমি একটা সাবরুটিন চেঞ্জ করে আরেকটা জিনিস অ্যাড করো, আর একটা পাবলিকেশন হয়ে যাবে। আর স্টুডেন্টরাও তারা তখন দেখে যে হ্যাঁ, একটা পাবলিকেশন হয়ে গেলে আমি যখন অ্যাপ্লিকেশন করছি কোনো একটা ভালো ইউনিভার্সিটিতে, তখন আমার একটা পাবলিকেশন থাকলে একটা কেন, এখন তো বিভিন্ন ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে আমরা যখন অ্যাপ্লিকেশন পাই, আন্ডার গ্রাজুয়েট স্টুডেন্ট হয়তো 6টা 7টা 8টা পেপার নিয়ে তারা অ্যাপ্লাই করে ইয়েতে। তো যেটা হয়, আপনি যেটা বলেছেন ওটা এক্স্যাক্টলি রাইট। আমি যখন তার সঙ্গে একটু 5 মিনিট কথা বলতে যাই, তখনই দেখি যে সে হয়তো ওই প্যারাগ্রাফ মানে পেপারের একটা ফিগার তৈরি করছে, কিন্তু পুরোটা পেপার ওই বাচ্চা ছেলে অথবা মেয়ে, সে কি তার ফিজিক্স অথবা তার কি এমন হয়েছে যে পুরাটা সে বুঝতে পারবে? অ্যাডভাইজার হ্যাজ পুট টুগেদার থিংস, কিন্তু সে পুরা জিনিসটা ওই ফিগার 3টাই এক্সপ্লেন করতে পারছে না ফিগার 1 এর বদলে। তখন যেটা হয় যে ন্যাচারালি ওই একই রিয়াকশন হয়, যে সে যদি একটা তার নিজের কাজটা পাবলিশারের দরকার নেই। একটা আন্ডার গ্রাজুয়েট স্টুডেন্ট কেন পাবলিশ করতে হবে তাকে একটা র্যাঙ্ক জার্নালে ইয়ের জন্য? অধিকাংশ সময় এটার প্রয়োজন নাই। পাবলিকেশনটা একটা ট্রেনিং, হ্যাঁ সেটা আমি মানছি, লেখা অথবা কি করে লিখতে হয়, কি করে ফ্রেম করতে হয়, প্রেজেন্ট করতে হয়, কিন্তু এটা প্রাইমারিলি দোষ হচ্ছে অ্যাডভাইজারের লোভের। অ্যাডভাইজার আসলে স্টুডেন্টকে অ্যাবিউজ করেছে তার নিজের স্বার্থের জন্য, এবং স্টুডেন্ট ও সেই সাথে মানে যেহেতু অন্যান্য স্টুডেন্টরা তারা পেয়েছে স্কলারশিপ, সুতরাং সেও ওই পথে গেছে, কিন্তু দোষ শেষ পর্যন্ত ওই অ্যাডভাইজারের লোভের। ওইখানে না করলে ঠিক স্টুডেন্টের এই 10টা পাবলিকেশন বন্ধ হবে না, এটা সম্ভব না। এইটাই অ্যাড করতে যাচ্ছিলাম। কিন্তু স্টুডেন্টরা যদি কেউ এখানে শুনে থাকে তাহলে আমি বলবো যে ভয় পাওয়ার কিছুই নেই। একটা অ্যাডভাইজার যদি বিদেশে, অ্যাটলিস্ট আমরা যখন দেখি আমরা পেপারটা খুলে পড়ি একটা স্টুডেন্ট নেওয়ার আগে, কারণ একটা স্টুডেন্টকে নিব 5 বছরের জন্য, সেই স্টুডেন্টরা তার লাইফের বেস্ট সময়টা আমার সঙ্গে কাটাবে, যে প্রশ্ন আমি তাকে দেব সেই প্রশ্ন সে বলে তার লাইফের বেস্ট সময়টা কাটাবে। র্যান্ডম একটা পার্সনকে তো আমি নেব না। তো সেই জন্য আমি কিন্তু পেপারটা পড়বো, আর যেহেতু পেপারটা পড়বো সেহেতু একটা পেপার হলেই হবে, আধাটা পেপার হলেও হবে, একটা থিসিসের একটা রিপোর্ট হলেও হবে, কিন্তু আমার জন্য 10টা পেপারের দরকার নেই যে পেপারে সে ফিগার 1 জানে কিন্তু ফিগার 3 এর ওয়াই অ্যাক্সিসটা সে পড়েই দেখেনি যে ওয়াই অ্যাক্সিসটা কি ছিল। এইটাই বলা।
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার, ইটস ভেরি ভেরি ইউজফুল কমেন্ট স্যার। আমরা একটু শেষে চলে আসছি প্রোগ্রামের। আমি তারেক রহমান স্যারকে একটু বলবো যে এইসব ব্যাপারে আমাদের স্টুডেন্টদের ব্যাপারে, একদম ফ্রেশ স্টুডেন্ট যারা, তাদের প্রফেসর তারেক রহমান, তাদের ব্যাপারে যদি আপনি খুব সংক্ষেপে কিছু বলেন আর কি, এবং আমরা লাস্ট শুনবো আমাদের আতাল করিম স্যারের কাছ থেকে।
Thank you once again. আমি actually really liked your comment, Professor Ashraful Alam. আপনার কমেন্ট খুব সুন্দর, যে আমি really liked এই জন্য যে স্টুডেন্টদেরকে এই পথে যাওয়ার জন্য বা এই পথে পরিচালিত করার জন্য বেসিক্যালি সুপারভাইজার্স আর রেসপন্সিবল। তারা যদি if supervisors guide them very well what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do, these things may not happen. কিন্তু at the same time reality হচ্ছে যে আমি যদি আমার ব্যক্তিগত অভিজ্ঞতা থেকে আপনাকে বলি, এই গত 1 মাস আগের মাঝে একটা ঘটনা। আমার এক প্রাক্তন স্টুডেন্ট, সে মাস্টার্স করেছে আমার সাথে, সে আমার কাছে এসছে একটা গ্রাজুয়েট রিসার্চ অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্টশিপের জন্য, কারণ কোভিড-19 এর কারণে তার চাকরি চলে গেছে এই মুহূর্তে। তো এখন তার চাকরি নেই। সে বলছে যে স্যার আপনার কাছে কোনো জিআরএ আছে কিনা। তো তখন আমি বললাম তুমি পিএইচডির জন্য বা অ্যাপ্লাই করো। তো সে বললো যে স্যার পিএইচডির জন্য অ্যাপ্লাই করলাম, কিন্তু 3-4টা ইউনিভার্সিটিতে একটাতে হলো না। তো তুমি কেন হলো না? তো কারণটা হচ্ছে যে স্যার আমার মাস্টার্সে মাত্র একটা পেপার, আর যারা পিএইচডির জন্য করেছে ওদের কেউ কেউ এসছে ইন্ডিয়া থেকে, কেউ কেউ এসছে চায়না থেকে, ওদের এক একজনের 8টা-10টা করে পেপার। তো আলটিমেটলি কোথাও আমার হয়নি, কিন্তু ওদের হয়ে গেল। এখন ওই যে স্টুডেন্ট গুলো যাদের ওই মাস্টার্স এর জন্য 8টা বা 10টা পেপার চায়না থেকে এসছে, ইন্ডিয়া থেকে এসছে, তাদের এই অ্যাচিভমেন্ট কম্পেয়ার টু আমার ওই স্টুডেন্টের তার অ্যাচিভমেন্ট, এটা এখন কি করে আমি রিয়েলিটিটা কি? রিয়েলিটিটা হচ্ছে অ্যাট দি এন্ড কিন্তু ওই একটা ভার্সেস ওই 8টা পেপার। যদিও আমি আমাদের মতো অনেকেই ওই একটা পেপার কি লিখেছে, কেন লিখেছে, কতটুকু তারা বুঝতেছে এটাই বিচার করি, কিন্তু মেনি আউট দেয়ার তারা কিন্তু এটা করে না। তো অ্যাট দি এন্ড আবার ওই স্টুডেন্টরাও কিন্তু ভিকটিম হয়। আবার আমি আপনাকে এরকম এক্সাম্পল দিতে পারবো যে বাংলাদেশি স্টুডেন্টরা এখানে এসে যখন এই মালয়েশিয়াতে এসে পিএইচডি করে, তো ওরা পেপার করতে পারে না খুব সহজে। তো যে কারণে ওরা এটা করে, আপনারা শুনলে হয়তো খারাপ লাগতে পারে যে আমি এক্সাম্পল দিব স্পেসিফিক ইউনিভার্সিটি, যে বুয়েটের বা ঢাকা ইউনিভার্সিটির স্টুডেন্টরা তারা এখানে এসে রিভিউয়ার সিলেক্ট করে তাদের ফ্রেন্ড সার্কেলে। অর্থাৎ ওই বুয়েটে যারা অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট প্রফেসর লেকচারার বা ঢাকা ইউনিভার্সিটি লেকচারার অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট প্রফেসর, ওভাবে রিভিউয়ার সিলেক্ট করে তারপর তারা পাবলিশ করে, এবং তারা 6টা 7টা 8টা করে পেপার পাবলিশ করে তাদের টার্গেট হচ্ছে আলটিমেটলি ইউএসএ, ইউকে, অস্ট্রেলিয়া, এইসব বড় বড় দেশে চলে যাবে। তো এখন দেখেন এই যে বাস্তবতাটা এমন একটা পর্যায়ে এসে দাঁড়িয়েছে যে আমরা অনেকেই স্ট্রাগল করি যে সত্য কোনটা, রাইট কোনটা, ঠিক কোনটা, এটা বোঝানোর জন্য। হাই ইম্প্যাক্ট ফ্যাক্টরের থেকে একটা কোয়ালিটি জার্নালে পাবলিশ করা ইজ মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট, এর শেখানোর জন্য স্ট্রাগল করি। কিন্তু অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম আমার আরো 5 জন কলিগ সেটা করে না। তখন মানে এই একটা এই কনফিউশন এবং স্ট্রাগলের ভিতরে আসলে টিকে থাকাটা ইজ মোর ডিফিকাল্ট। আমি হয়তো বেঁচে আছি, আমি হয়তো বেঁচে থাকবো কারণ আমি একটা পজিশন নিয়ে আসি, কিন্তু আমি যদি আমার স্টুডেন্টের দিকে তাকাই তখন আমার নিজেরও খারাপ লাগে যে ওর কি হবে, ও তো আজকে চাকরি নেই, আমার কাছে একটা মাস্টার্স পরেও সে জিআরএ এর জন্য অ্যাপ্লাই করতেছে, তার চাকরি নেই বলে, বা সে পিএইচডিতে চান্স পাচ্ছে না বলে, ওর জন্য তো আমাদের কষ্ট হয়। তখন মাঝে মাঝে মনে হয় যে যাক এদের জন্য যে কটা করতে পারে করুক, যেভাবে করতে পারে করুক, করে গিয়ে একটা চাকরি টাকরি পাক, অসুবিধা নেই। কারণ ওয়ার্ল্ড আউট দেয়ার ইজ নট অনলি আস। এখানে ওই আপনার সেই বিভিন্ন দেশ থেকে, বিভিন্ন জায়গা থেকে বিভিন্ন রকমের নাম্বার নিয়ে নাম্বার গেমের ভিতরে তারা টিকে আছে, তাদেরকে টিকে থাকতে হবে। তো আমি একটা ছোট্ট একটা আপনাকে মানে আমি একটু আগে আপনাদের এই টেক্সট মেসেজ গুলো পড়তেছিলাম, সেক্ষেত্রে মনির আহমেদ নামের একজন একটা কমেন্ট করেছে, মানে আই রিয়েলি লাইক কমেন্ট হচ্ছে এরকম, মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট ইজ ওয়েদার আওয়ার ওয়ার্ক অ্যান্ড রাইটিং ইজ এরর অ্যান্ড ম্যানিপুলেশন ফ্রি অর নট, দেন জার্নাল ইজ প্রেডিটরি অর নট। তো সে এই আমি জানি না উনি কে, উনি লেকচারার কিনা বা স্টুডেন্ট কিনা, উনি এই কথাটা যেটা লিখেছেন সেটা কিন্তু মানে খুবই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ একটা কথা, যে আমাদের এই এই এক্সিস্টেন্স অফ প্রেডিটরি জার্নাল বা এই যে হান্টিং ফর দি নাম্বার গেম, এই টোটাল ইস্যুগুলো আসলে ইস্যুগুলোর পেছনে একটা মূল ইস্যু হচ্ছে গিয়ে এই ফ্যাব্রিকেশন অফ রেজাল্টস, ম্যানিপুলেশন অফ রেজাল্টস। আমরা রেজাল্ট মেক আপ করি, রেজাল্ট ডুপ্লিকেট করি, করে পাবলিশ করি, ইত্যাদি ইত্যাদি, এগুলোর মাধ্যমেই কিন্তু এগুলো হচ্ছে। সো আমি আসলে কি স্পেসিফিক্যালি আমি কি বলবো আমার স্টুডেন্টদেরকে, আমার জুনিয়রদেরকে, এটা খুব বলা মুশকিল। কারণ আপনারা সত্যের উপরে, ন্যায়ের উপরে টিকে থাকবেন, আদর্শের উপরে টিকে থাকবেন, এবং এট দি এন্ড ইউ শ্যাল উইন 50 years later, by the time your life is, your career is over. আমি আজকে একজন প্রফেসর হয়ে আপনাকে সেরকম একটা পরামর্শ দিতেই পারি যে হ্যাঁ, আপনারা সত্যের উপরে টিকে থাকেন, একটা দুইটা পেপার, 5টা পাবলিকেশন নিয়ে দেখেন কি করা যায়। আলটিমেটলি যখন চাকরি হবে না তখন তো আপনি আমার কি দোষ দিবেন, যে আপনি তো বলেছিলেন 5টা পেপার নিয়ে হবে, কিন্তু আমার তো হচ্ছে না, যেটা আমার স্টুডেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে হয়েছে। তো এই যে এই বাস্তবতার ভিতরে এই ব্যালেন্সটা করা, এটা কিভাবে করবে, আই এম রিয়েলি কনফিউজ। ব্যক্তিগতভাবে আমি অত্যন্ত কনফিউজড ব্যাপারে। আমার বিশ্বাস যে প্রফেসর আতাউল করিম এবং প্রফেসর আশরাফুল আলম, আপনাদের আরো যারা অভিজ্ঞ, তারা হয়তো অনেক অনেক ভালো এ ব্যাপারে পরামর্শ দিতে পারবেন ইনশাআল্লাহ। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ।
থ্যাংক ইউ মাচ। তো আমরা একদম শেষের দিকে চলে আসতেছি। জাস্ট একটা কথা আপনাদের দুজনের সাথে আমি অ্যাড করে, আমার যে আমিও যদি মানে টিচার এবং মানে ছাত্রদের সাথে সারাক্ষণ থাকি, তো আমি আমার এই মুহূর্তে আমার একজন ছাত্র আমাকে একটা বিউটিফুল মেসেজ সে দিয়েছে আমার ইয়েতে, আমি একটু পরে শোনাচ্ছি যে এই ফিলিংসটা যেন আমাদের ছাত্রদের মধ্যে আসতে পারে। তো সে লিখছে যে স্যার লেটেক ফাইলটা, মানে সে একটা পেপার লিখতেছে লেটেক ইউজ করে, লেটেক ফাইলটা দেখলে কি যে ভালো লাগছে, মনে হয় যেন একটা বাচ্চা আস্তে আস্তে বড় হচ্ছে। এই যে ফিলিংটা, যে আসলে আমাদের প্রত্যেকটা পেপার একটা সন্তান, এই সন্তানটাকে আস্তে 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 আমরা লালন করে তাকে নিয়ে যাচ্ছি, এই ফিলিংটা আসলে আমাদের খুব দরকার। একজন রিসার্চের জন্য এই প্যাশনটা আমাদের খুব দরকার। আমরা আশা করি আমাদের ছাত্রদের মধ্যে এটা আস্তে আস্তে বিল্ড আপ হবে এটা। তো এটার জন্য আমাদের সবারই আসলে সবার চেষ্টা দরকার। আমি শেষ করার আগে আমি আমাদের আর দুজন স্পিকার ছিলেন, ডক্টর সাজিদ এবং ডক্টর মাইনুল, তাদেরকে একটু জিজ্ঞেস করে নিচ্ছে যে তারা কোনো কিছু সাপ্লিমেন্ট করতে চান কিনা। আমাদের লাস্ট আমাদের বলবেন আতাউল করিম স্যার, বাট সাজিদ এবং মাইনুল, ডক্টর সাজিদ, ডক্টর মাইনুল, ডু ইউ ওয়ান্ট টু অ্যাড এনিথিং, এনি কমেন্টস, এনি সাজেশন?
আচ্ছা, আমি মেবি বলতে পারি। আমার যেটা মনে হয় যে এটা মানে পাবলিশিং একটা জাস্ট ওয়ান উইল ইন দ্য কগ অফ দ্য বিগার পিকচার অফ রিসার্চ এন্ড এভরিথিং। এবং পার্ডুতে আমি যখন পিএইচডি তে গিয়েছিলাম 2013-এ, আমার ফান্ডিং এর পূর্ব শর্ত হিসেবে একটা প্রোগ্রাম করতে হয়েছিল, রেসপন্সিবল কন্ডাক্ট অফ সায়েন্টিফিক রিসার্চ। এবং এটা খুবই এনলাইটেনিং ছিল যে আসলে মানে পাবলিশিং কোথায় করতে হবে, রিসার্চ কিভাবে করতে হবে, এ ধরনের একটা ফর্মাল ট্রেনিং প্রোগ্রামে আমাদের যেতে হয়েছিল। আমার মতে এই ধরনের একটা ট্রেনিং ফার্স্ট অফ অল মানে অবশ্যই পলিসি মেকার লেভেলে ঠিক করতে হবে বাংলাদেশে, যে আমরা কি চাই, যে আমরা কি আসলে মানে মানে ইউনিট দিয়ে প্রমোশন সেটা চাই, নাকি আমরা কোয়ালিটি রিসার্চে বাংলাদেশের সায়েন্স এন্ড টেকনোলজিকে এগিয়ে নিতে চাই, সেটা পলিসি মেকার লেভেলে ডিসাইড করতে হবে। পাশাপাশি ওয়ান্স সেই পলিসিটা সেট করা হচ্ছে, আমাদের সব ইয়াং গ্রাজুয়েট স্টুডেন্টদেরকে আমাদের ট্রেন করতে হবে যে কিভাবে আসলে রিসার্চ করতে হয়, কিভাবে পাবলিশ করতে হয়, এবং কোন ধরনের রিসার্চ কালচার অ্যাপ্রোপ্রিয়েট ইন দ্য সায়েন্টিফিক কমিউনিটি। এই জিনিসগুলি আমাদের ভেরি আর্লি অন আন্ডার গ্রাজুয়েট স্টুডেন্ট এবং গ্রাজুয়েট স্টুডেন্টদেরকে মেবি ট্রেন করতে হবে। তো যেহেতু এটা আমার ইয়াং একাডেমি এর ফার্স্ট প্রোগ্রাম, আমি হয়তো রিকোয়েস্ট করবো যে আমরা এই ধরনের কোনো প্রোগ্রাম ডেভেলপ করার জন্য আরো কাজ করতে পারি, যে কিভাবে স্টুডেন্টদেরকে ট্রেন করা যায় টু লার্ন দ্য বেস্ট প্র্যাকটিসেস রিসার্চ।
Thank you, Sajid. Thank you very much. Dr. Moinul, do you want to
জি,
add anything?
আচ্ছা, আমি শুধু একটু অ্যাড করতে চাই প্রফেসর আশরাফুল আলম স্যারের কথা থেকে, যে আসলে খুব বড় পরিসরে যদি আমরা চেঞ্জ এক্সপেক্ট করি সেটা অনেক সময় ডিফিকাল্ট হয় এবং অনেক ক্ষেত্রে সাকসেসফুল হয় না। বাট আশরাফুল আলম স্যার যেটা বললেন যে আমরা খুব ছোট পরিসরে কিন্তু চেঞ্জ করতেই পারি, যদি আমরা একটা যে আমাদের নিজ নিজ বিভাগ থেকে যদি আমরা চিন্তা করি যে না আমার বিভাগে আমরা কজন টিচার আছি, 50-100 মেবি হাইয়েস্ট, যে আমরা ঠিক করতে পারি যে না আমরা আমাদের বিভাগ থেকে আমরা করছি যে না আমরা প্রেডিটরি জার্নালে পাবলিশ করব না। সো এতটুকু যদি আমরা করতে পারি, এভাবে যদি যার যার বিভাগ থেকে কে কয়েকজন মিলে এগিয়ে আসে, তাহলে আসলে কিন্তু আস্তে আস্তে চেঞ্জ আসবে আমার মনে হয়। খুব বড় পরিসরে আমরা কিছু করতে গেলে অনেক সময় দেখা যায় যে আমরা ফ্রাস্ট্রেটেড হয়ে যাই বা সেটা সাকসেসফুল হয় না আমাদের দেশের বর্তমান যে পরিস্থিতি সেখানে। বাট আমরা ছোট পরিসরে কিন্তু এই চেঞ্জ গুলো আনতেই পারি, এবং আমাদের যে নতুন বা ইয়াং রিসার্চাররা আছে তারা যদি এই বিষয়ে সচেতন হয়, তারা যদি এগিয়ে আসে, ভয়েস রেজ করে যে না আমরা প্রেডিটরি করব না, না আমরা ভালো জার্নালের দিকে যাব, কারণ আমাকে তো কেউ স্টপ করছে না। আমরা যে বলছি যে না আমরা প্রেডিটরি করব না, আমরা যদি ভালো জার্নাল করতে চাই আমার ইউনিভার্সিটি অথরিটি কিন্তু আমাকে স্টপ করছে না সেখানে। সো আমার সেদিকে কোনো বাধা নেই। সো আমি যদি ছোট পরিসরে কয়েকজন মিলে যার যার বিভাগ থেকে আমরা প্রতিজ্ঞা নিই যে না আমরা ভালো পাবলিকেশন করব, ভালো রিসার্চ করব, তাহলে আমার মনে হয় অবশ্যই চেঞ্জ আনা সম্ভব। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Dr. Moinul. সেম ফিলিংস আমরা সবসময় রাখতে চাই। আমি আমাদের কলিগদেরকে একটা জিনিস সবসময় বলি যে আমাদের ফার্স্ট অবজেক্টিভে থাকা উচিত আমার ছাত্রদের জন্য রিসার্চ শিখে, জাস্ট সেজন্য রিসার্চটা শিখে, মানে আমি চাই একটা ছাত্র আমেরিকা যাওয়ার আগে সেজন্য বেসিক জিনিসগুলো এখান থেকে খুব ভালো করে শিখে যায়, যে আমি একটা এক্সআরডি ডাটা পেয়েছি, সেই ডাটাটা আমি অ্যানালাইজ করা জানি কারেক্টলি। আমি যেন একটা ইলেকট্রন মাইক্রোস্কোপ থেকে একটা ইমেজ আমাদের দেশে নিতে পারে, সেই মাইক্রোস্কোপ ইমেজটাকে সেজন্য অ্যানালাইসিস করাটা শিখে, বেসিক লেভেলটা শিখে, এটা রাইট অ্যানালাইসিসটা কি, এই শেখাটার উপরে আমরা মনে হয় আমাদের এমফাসিসটা অনেক বেশি দেওয়া উচিত, যে কি সে শিখতে পারলো। যদি সে শিখতে পারে এবং রাইটলি সে যদি শিখতে পারে, এট দ্য এন্ড অফ দ্য ডে সে যে থিসিসটা করুক, যে রিপোর্টটা লিখুক, সেখান থেকে কিছু না কিছু ভালো জায়গায় পাবলিশ হবে, এটা আমি বিশ্বাস করি। সো আমাদের অনেক কিছু বলার ছিল, আসলে আমাদের টাইম আসলে অনেক অনেক বেশি, আমরা মানে ওভার টাইমে আছি এখানে। আমি লাস্ট প্রফেসর আতাউল করিম স্যারকে বলবো যে স্যার, মানে আমরা মানে আপনি এক জেনারেশন, আমরা তারপরে জেনারেশন, আরেক জেনারেশন, এখানে 3 জেনারেশনের আমরা আছি। আমাদের 2 জেনারেশনের জন্যই আপনার স্যার সাজেশন, আপনার অ্যাডভাইস স্যার আপনাদেরকে একটু বলেন লাস্ট, আপনাদের আমরা শেষ করতে চাই।
Assalamu alaikum. I learned so much. One of the reasons in my life I never worked for a corporation. I worked for universities because I thought I'll be living next to the brightest of the mind. And the brightest of the mind are usually graduate students. Usually. I learned a lot more from them than from my colleagues. I'm very blunt about it. So hopes are there tremendously. And I believe if whoever goes and gets the right advisor, সেটা ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় হোক, বুয়েটে হোক, they're the one who are going to change the lifestyle and thought process for you. And I wish you all success. Just a thought, just because আপনি আমার ইউনিভার্সিটি অ্যাপ্লাই করলেন আর বললেন আপনার এতগুলা পাবলিকেশন আছে, just like Professor Alam said, if he is going to recruit that person, he's going to read your paper. He's going to figure out from that. He's going to figure out a lot from your email, how you even wrote the email. That will tell whether the email matches the article or not. So the advisor, the sharp ones, I think they're going to figure out sooner or later your quality of work. So it goes back to if the local advisor who is working with the student, just as you say, can empower those students to know how to conduct research, how to ask questions. First, to ask questions. Keep on asking questions. If you don't ask questions, you will never look for an answer. If those are imprinted, I believe, just as Professor Alam said, and many of you say, small effort like yours can change the universities. আজকে যদি আপনারা মনে করেন ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে 17টি জার্নাল আছে, আপনারা ইয়াং রকটা যদি বলেন আমরা কিন্তু এর কোনোটাতেই ছাপাবো না, ওই 17টা জার্নাল কিন্তু এখনই মারা যাবে, বিকজ ওরা আপনাদেরকে এক্সপ্লয়েট করে ওরা চালাচ্ছে। এটা করলে আপনার প্রমোশন হবে কি না হবে। সো দিজ আর দ্য স্ট্যান্ডস আই থিঙ্ক মেনি অফ ইউ উইল টেক and can take, and I know you have to be very careful what you do in Bangladesh. বেশি নড়াচড়া করলে আবার হিতে বিপরীত হতে পারে। You have to be very careful because at the end of the day you are trying to cultivate great research without causing too much animosity. আমাদের দেশে unfortunately good work always attracts animosity. Always attracts animosity. So I ask you, be careful what you do and how you do. But I'm sure there are good ways you can do, just as those other people long ago succeeded in changing their environment. Thank you so much. And I appreciate, I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. আমাদের এখানে হ্যান্ড রেজ করছেন প্রফেসর শাহিমা চৌধুরী ম্যাডাম। Madam, she was a former professor of University of Dhaka, Department of Physics, and fellow of Bangladesh Academy of Sciences. Madam, please, কিছু বলেন ম্যাডাম।
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to attend your program, Basi, and I was very pleased to see Ataul Karim. You remember me, I hope, Ataul.
I do.
Yes, and as before, you gave a wonderful statistical data of number of journals in Bangladesh. And just to let you know that your alma mater and my alma mater, Physics Department of Dhaka University, do not have any journal. Many of the universities, including many of the departments like Medical Physics, Jagannath University, Jahangirnagar, of all physics department, they have their own journals, but we never did this. We want quality, and we always encourage our students to publish in quality journals. And that's why in some small places also, if you can keep your logical that will keep the legal aspect like this. We work together. Basit worked with my students, co-supervised my students. And I know Tariq for a long time. Ainul was my student from my next department. Sajid is my son. And so it was a wonderful event. And I can see Ahad from Japan. He's also very active in science community, in publication, organizing this kind of events. And I hope the younger generation will be motivated, like if you can bring Muhammad Ataul Karim and Muhammad Alam, like speakers, they will be inspired. And thank you for arranging this program, and special thanks for letting me talk today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you for your inspiring words. Ataul Karim sir, just আপনি হ্যান্ড রেজ করেছিলেন, স্যার কিছু অ্যাড করবেন স্যার?
I just wanted to say thank you. No, I do remember you, and I know who your son is also. Yeah. I figured everything out. Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
You're most welcome. আমাদের যদি মানে কোনো ভুল ত্রুটি হয়, আমরা সমস্ত দর্শকদের কাছ থেকে আমরা ক্ষমা চেয়ে নিচ্ছি। আপনাদের এনি সাজেশন এবং কিছু কোয়েশ্চেনের আনসার আমরা এখানে দিতে পারি নাই বা আমাদের সময়ের জন্য, আমরা এই আনসারগুলো আপনাদেরকে অবশ্যই জানিয়ে দিব, আইদার ইমেইলে অথবা এখানে যেভাবে হোক। আপনার কোয়েশ্চেন আনসারগুলো আমরা রিচ করব। এই ভিডিওটা আমরা এডিট করে আমাদের ইয়াং একাডেমি অফ বাংলাদেশ, ন্যাশনাল ইয়াং বাংলাদেশের NYAB ওয়েবসাইটে আমরা আপলোড করব। এবং যে কোনো সময় আপনাদের যে কোনো সাজেশন, যে কোনো কমেন্টস, এনিহাউ যদি আমরা কোনোভাবে অ্যাসিস্ট করতে পারি কোনো স্টুডেন্টকে, হ্যাঁ প্লিজ আমাদেরকে জানাবেন, আমরা চেষ্টা করব। এই প্ল্যাটফর্মটা তৈরি হয়েছে, আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য একটাই, যে টু মেক এ ব্রিজ বিটুইন দ্য ইয়াং এন্ড এক্সপিরিয়েন্স রিসার্চার্স, এবং আমাদের টু প্রমোট আওয়ার ইয়াং রিসার্চার্স, আওয়ার আর্লি স্টেজে যারা আছে তাদেরকে প্রমোট করা। সো আপনাদের যে কোনো হেল্প আমরা যদি করতে পারি, আমরা অবশ্যই উইল বি ভেরি গ্রেটফুল এন্ড উইল বি ভেরি প্লিজড। আজকের মতো সবাইকে শুভরাত্রি, আপনারা সবাই ভালো থাকবেন। আল্লাহ হাফিজ, আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Alaikum
Thank you.
assalam.
Thank you, sir.